I'm not saying you are, but I'm saying you're attacking an argument that no one else is making because it's a dog argument. If you're trying to, you keep saying that like,
no, I'm not
like you can't.
Well, at what point is it justified for me to do blackface? Like maybe I'm.
No, wait, hold on. It wouldn't be to black people.
Are you calling me a liar, motherfucker? Motherfucker, let me answer one of these questions. You want to dogpile me? Bring it on.
It sounds
Bring it
like
on, you
weaseling, to be honest.
Someone put their knee on this girl's neck.
Bring it on. Hop on. There's enough room on this dick for all of you. Hi. I'm about 3/8 Jewish, half white, and 1/8 South Asian. I'm going to read some. Often when I explain this to a white progressive, they smirk and they go, "You're white." I always feel a flush of anger at this, partly because they're dismissing the copious amounts of anti-Jewish racism I experience, but also because they're insulting me. White has become an insult. As a kid in a liberal college town, I learned to mock my own whiteness. It's the original virtue signal. To wear your skin like an embarrassing swastika tattoo, you have to continuously explain for the rest of your life. This seemed like a small concession at the time, and I thought anyone who complained about it was a Nazi. I'll never forget what the dean of my high school said to me after I'd been suspended for a self-published newsletter about race. "You don't know anything about racism because you're white." I stared at her in disbelief because her skin was maybe 2 shades darker than mine. The white principal said to me, "Did you ask your black friends what they thought of your article?" I smiled and said, "I don't have any black friends." This was in 2002. My hometown of Amherst, Massachusetts was the origin of this anti-white cancer, the raccoon city of the SJW virus, and I did my best to stop it from spreading. As you all know, I failed. But I'm still here, my white brothers and sisters, and I've convened this panel for a very specific reason. Even though most of us can feel a rising anti-white sentiment, we are heavily discouraged from acknowledging it. So anyone who does want to discuss it, or who needs to discuss it, is pushed to the far right, the only place where it is acceptable to share these feelings about your own body and about how others talk about it. That all changes tonight. We are here to prove that a group of 6 relatively normal people can have a relatively normal conversation about white grievance. Thank you. And I now pass the torch to Dick.
Thank you, MrGirl. Powerful words, powerful statement. Okay, folks, with an X, I'm going to ask some questions of everybody to get the discussion started. In no particular order, but feel free to chime in. Please let somebody finish their thoughts before you jump on top of them. I like the panel. It seems representative of America, or at least the Western world. We've got a lot of white. We've got some maybe quasi-Mexican thrown in here, Latino, 13% black. A little bit, what did you say, about 18% Jewish of something? I don't know. I can't do the math. So we're all speaking on behalf, just a pinch of Jewish, of Semitism. So we're all speaking on behalf of our races. Make sure you understand that before you get into it. Hunter, I'm going to start with you. Here is the topic for the discussion. Is anti-white sentiment rising? Is it fair to call this racism against white people? And if it's not fair now, when will it be fair? What do you think? I'll repeat it if you need it, but that's the topic.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I definitely do think that there is a rising anti-white sentiment. As far as the potential for harm, I don't think that it's there the same way that any kind of anti-black racism would be, since there are still systemic inequalities as far as for racial minorities, where those don't really exist for white people. However, it has definitely become far more socially acceptable to just shit on white people. I mean, this is where the whole meme comes from, where it's, oh, you want to be racist? Just put white in the beginning. Or you want to be sexist? Just say it's a white woman first. There's absolutely like a sentiment that is rising, that it's more or less acceptable to kind of shit on white people and make fun of them, or kind of like even what MrGirl said in the beginning is you can't have an opinion on this thing because you're white. Now, is it fair to call that racism? I mean, by the dictionary definition, if you are discriminating or belittling someone on the basis of their race, then I would say that that is racism, sure. But I think the big distinguishing factor is whether or not that anti-white racism has a likelihood of actually causing some kind of systemic harm, where I don't think that it really does. But just if it doesn't, I don't think that that justifies being racist against white people.
Everybody agree with that? I'm gonna throw it around the horn, open it up for discussion. What do you guys think?
I got two quick thoughts. One is that this panel might actually be too late. I don't know if anybody has noticed, but it feels like, and it's been feeling like this for a few years, not a few years, for 2 years. It's starting to feel like we've crested on some of this to where people are finally starting to look at the insane cancellations, the ridiculous Me Too's, these types of statements where people are like, I think we've peaked a little bit on the hysteria surrounding some of these like very, very progressive like social narratives. I was shocked that the Washington Post actually fired, her name wasn't Taylor Lorenz, right? It was the other journalist who who blew up her coworker on Twitter about saying that he was being sexist or whatever because he retweeted kind of a dumb joke. The fact that the Washington Post actually fired her for that was unbelievable to me. I didn't think that would happen. So I kind of wonder if, Felicia Somnes, I think it was. I kind of wonder if we've gotten past maybe the worst of it, or we're in the worst of it right now and it's going to start to swing back. That's one kind of thing I wonder. The second thing is, people talk about racism and they use these kind of like crazy definitions and they talk about white people. I think there's an unfairly high burden placed on white people, as strange as it is sometimes, when it comes to dealing with certain types of actions. Like, if you make fun of somebody for their skin color, they're probably going to feel bad for it. That's probably going to be almost universally true. The idea that white people are somehow immune to that and every other social group is not is just kind of strange. You can try to find reasons why, like somebody would be like, oh, well, white people are in a position of power. And it's like, okay, well, can I be anti-Semitic? Because there's a lot of Jewish bankers and people running media and shit, right? That should be okay because they have a lot of power. But nobody would say that. What about racist towards Chinese people that are doing well, right? That people will pull out these kind of esoteric, or I should say academic definitions of racism to justify racism against white people, but they wouldn't pass literally any other test. It doesn't make any sense. So yeah, that was my two main thoughts. I wonder if we're at the peak of the anti-white sentiment, and I think people need to stop having like this ultra high expectation of the average white person to just have a bunch of people who are racist towards them, but be okay with it.
So
Hunter, you said, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Hunter, you said that you don't think it causes systemic harm, the anti-white sentiment. Can you define that a little bit? What do you mean by systemic harm? And
yeah, I mean, usually when I'm talking about systemic racism, I'm just referring to any kind of a system, whether it be a social system or a established institution that leads to disproportionate negative results that impact one racial group more than another. So that's why I talk about the criminal justice system, for example, because there's no intent there to screw over Black people. However, unfortunately, according to the statistics, Black people are disproportionately screwed over by that criminal justice system. What I mean when I say the systemic thing as far as white people, generally it's just kind of accepted that white people are in a position of power right now. And no, that doesn't mean that that justifies being racist towards white people. But what it does mean is that it's far less likely that there will be some kind of systemic inequalities that arise from people saying dumb shit on Twitter against white people. Again, I'm not saying that justifies it. It doesn't. But I just think that that's something important to take into account.
I think the definition of system you're using is taking system almost up to like a global scale or a national scale. But Twitter itself is a system that is skewed against white people. So you could say, like, you can have different there's obviously systems within systems within systems.
I don't know if it's skewed. How is it skewed against white people other than people making like anti-white tweets? I get that, but like, what is?
I mean, yeah, I'm saying like so like
impacting.
The skewer is that like you can literally, there are certain classifications of people on Twitter that can act almost with impunity. Like I've seen comments made about killing white people or killing certain politicians that blow me away.
Yeah, but you can't talk about killing Jews on Twitter.
Of course, yeah.
And it's like, I can tell why they're not getting banned, and it's probably because they have a certain political disposition. You're less likely to get banned, but if you're on the right targeting certain groups of people, like you can get dinged for hate speech like almost immediately.
Sure. Well, then maybe that would be maybe that's a good example then of where there is some kind of a systemic inequality against white people. That could definitely be a thing. Yeah.
What was weird for me is I've spent most of my life, because I'm pretty left-leaning and run in pretty left-leaning circles, most of my life has been spent in systems where white people are punished more for expressing their beliefs, opinions, and prejudices than anybody else. So while I agree, if on a global scale, sure, it's better to be white, but I've been in many situations like this panel. The whiter you are in this panel, probably the less freedom you have to say whatever you want without losing your fucking job. Like, we all know that.
I think something that's important to keep in mind when we talk about systemic racism or systemic injustice. The system there, I think, is standing in more for like our broader institutions. So the institutions of like academia, like schools, or the institution of criminal justice, or maybe the institution related to voting or medicine. I don't know if I would say that like systemic injustice because people are mean to you on a certain platform, a social media platform, is like the same thing.
Yeah, but Twitter is the bigger, the social media companies as a conglomerate are bigger than maybe schools or certain groups of schools.
What's the negative outcome that is impacting white people at disproportionate rates? Like
you
there
lose
might be
your
more people
job
on Twitter being rude to white people.
You can't talk, or you lose your job, or if you live in a horrible dystopian fascist state like Lonerbox, you could go to jail.
I'm not sure what you mean. How like you can get in trouble or get fired for a bad tweet, yes, and sometimes that can be really ridiculously over the top.
Yeah, but what makes a bad tweet from you and what makes a bad tweet from me are different. I can say shit that you can't.
But maybe
like what? Say it.
Is this like an identity politics thing?
Yeah, well, it's not identity politics. It's literally your race gives you, or I could say shit about you that you can't say about me. I could say, wow, Hunter was such a typical white man on the panel. Listen to the shit he said. You could literally just swap white for Jewish and MrGirl for Hunter, and then say the same tweet about me, and you will get banned.
Yeah, I mean, this kind of falls right in line with what I was already saying, though, is that there is, in fact, a growing anti-white sentiment, and it's also more socially acceptable to shit on white people. But the problem is that, well, hold on. White people, at least in America, make up the majority. Not for now, at least. Okay. So what that means is that if you are in a group with your friends and you're cracking jokes over and over again at the expense of black people, you have a higher likelihood of leading to an actual impact or a material harm on black people simply because they make up a smaller demographic in the country. Less people have seen black people or interacted with black people in America. And just based on that fact alone, that means that it has a higher likelihood of causing actual harm or reinforcing negative stereotypes.
I think that can be true. So this is a huge problem that people on the left have. People on the left are really good at breaking apart generally, hopefully, are good at analyzing classes or groups of people. And that's fine. But it doesn't distill down to the individual all the time. Something may be true on a macro level, but you're not going to feel it on a micro level. On a macro level, white people are privileged. You're not generally getting shot down in the United States for being white. On the macro level, that's absolutely true. But if you're like a poor dude that lives in like a meth fucked town, like a fucking trailer park, and you've got somebody talking that white privilege shit at you, you're going to feel like, what the fuck are you talking about? Where the fuck is my privilege? I don't feel it, right? Or if you're in a group hanging out with people and, 50 people call you cracker, mayo, blah, 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 and you're like, okay, well, and then you like drop an N-word and everybody's like beating the shit out of you now, while they're kicking your ass and they're saying like, well, it's okay, like systemically you're privileged, like nobody's going to feel that. It's on the micro level, it's So even if these things are true on a macro level, I don't think it's necessarily relevant. It might be good when talking about macro level things, but individuals aren't going to be okay with that disparity in treatment. I don't think that's a recipe for success.
Just to clarify, if I could just clarify really quick though, really quick to what Destiny said. I'm talking about as far as the macro level, then you have a higher likelihood of having negative downstream effects. I am not saying that justifies making racist jokes about white people because they are less likely to feel those effects. I think that if you are being racist against somebody, again, it's wrong no matter what. There's really no context where I would find racism to be justifiable. It's only that if you, as a white person, are making fun of black people, that has a higher likelihood of leading to harm. I'm not using it as a justification to make fun of white people, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Social media companies are not a micro level. This is where most, maybe for certain classes of people, certainly most human communication occurs, especially non-personal human communication. Places where we talk non-privately with each other is mostly governed by these companies, and their policies are all slanted anti-white.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I agree. Sorry, go ahead. I agree with almost everything that y'all have said. So I definitely think like anti-white sentiments on the rise, and I think it's disgusting. I think like when we look back to like the C-word discourse that just happened recently, it was funny to hear that like people had like this idea that yes, you should be able to use the slur against white people indiscriminately. So it was pretty crazy. My only thing about this that I want to kind of get y'all thoughts on are, it seems like a lot of the anti-white sentiment is coming from like the white radical left, though. Like, it's like, I agree that there are black racist people. Like, I agree that there's racist people everywhere. But the people that are making these policies, the people that are like really stirring up a lot of this anti-white sentiment is white people. That's the thing that's weird to me. It's like white radical leftists are the ones who are like pushing this onto the white race somewhere.
Yeah,
do y'all see it that way too?
That's kind of...
We're gonna say real quick, there's like a quote, there's like a meme where it's like, making fun of white people for being white is the whitest thing you can possibly do. And it's like 100% true, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to say, is that like the problem with getting rid of, like trying to get rid of anti-white racism is you can't really call out the fact that this is like a very white problem. I think especially...
I think you're all doing it right now. I think you're doing it right now.
In parts of the BLM protests, I kind of noticed, especially in very, very white parts of the United States, or even in Scotland as well, it was just like there was this real kind of like lack of like there was always this kind of like ideological confusion about like what do we actually want to achieve. Like it's like it was really hard to get an answer out of people at a lot of times. I think there was someone from Portland I knew who was saying that like, why were all those protesters, like those Antifa people, just so obsessed with the police when the black community in Portland didn't really feel like the police was anywhere near their biggest problem? Like the biggest problem for black people in Portland was like gentrification or housing discrimination or employment access and things like that. But then you find yourself in a position where you're like, well, we can't go to these shops at night because Antifa are going to fight the Proud Boys for a 28th day in a row.
Yes.
The problem with that is kind of like, I don't really know what to call that other than like, I guess like the phrase is like impotence corrupts just as much as power. Like this is kind of like well-intentioned, like maybe like left-leaning white people who just had no idea how to help. You know,
I shudder to call them like well-intentioned. I think there's a rising like radical white people that want to view themselves as virtuous to themselves and to their friends. So they take these like really, really dumbass positions that nobody actually agrees with. It's like when you talk about like Antifa, right? Like, you don't see an army of black people saying, hey, we need Antifa to step up for us. We need protection from the Proud Boys. No, they've decided that themselves, and they've taken these ridiculous positions. And I don't think it's coming from like black people asking Antifa to step up.
Yeah, and I think also... You also see, one of the things I brought up a couple days ago is there were so many videos. It must have been at least 10 different videos I saw when there were the live streams of all the riots where you've got like these poor black people on camera and they're like begging these like white Antifa kids over and over again, like, please get the fuck out, like leave. Nobody wants you to do this. Get out of here. Like leave. Nobody wants this. Yeah.
Hey, I think you're doing it right now. I think you're all doing it. I think you're all saying like, white people, right? The last 5 things everybody says been complaining about white people.
Well, but that's because this is where this comes from.
Wait. I want to break down what just fucking happened here because it's blowing my mind. Yeah, fuck you, Steven. We start out with Gambit says, well, you know, I don't think black people are to blame for this at all. Maybe there's a couple bad eggs, but mostly black people are really nice, and everybody starts fumbling to be, oh yeah, it's not white people hate white people. That's where all the racism is coming from. Antifa. Let's throw Antifa under the bus. Like, I'll come up with a Proud Boys Antifa. I can name all the worst white people I can think of, and everybody's foaming at their mouth to shit on white people. This is a white grievance panel.
Yeah.
So there are racist black people.
Yeah, but we're grieving against other white people because they're the ones that are fucking us up. That's the issue, right?
Grievances that are due to the actions of other white people, just like there can be black grievances due to the issues of other white people.
God.
Like I feel like, and maybe it's because
I don't think that's fair.
Maybe it's because black people just didn't do all the crazy sociological education the progressives did. But every time I saw it was really funny. Hassan tried to ambush Myth on stream, and he was like, Myth, this whole cracker thing is real dumb, right? Like you don't think like it's fine if we call white people cracker, right? And Myth was like, no, dude, I don't think probably shouldn't call anybody racial slurs. And it was like, okay, oh shit, that was awkward. But I think even I've talked to a few black people about this, and obviously I don't have all the black people in my binder to talk to. But like when I'm hearing statements of like we should be able to call white people whatever racial slur we want and not say any racial slurs to black people, that just sounds like a really white statement. I can't imagine like other minority groups saying that like, yeah, this is cool, this is okay.
White meaning stupid, right?
No, stupid and white.
That's what. So white.
So this is the thing, MrGirl. Like, a lot of black people understand the consequences of being racist. So, like, even the black people that I know that are racist, they aren't usually outwardly racist because it's like self-degrading in some ways. Like, you're not going to exist in a predominantly white society as an anti-white black person. Like that doesn't really exist. Like that person isn't going to have a lot of opportunity. So I do agree with you that there are lots of anti-white sentiments that come from racist black people, racist Mexican people, racist everything. But I think the overwhelming majority of it that we're seeing, and the reason that the things that we're probably going to talk about in this panel are due to other white people.
The majority of all sentiments are due to white people in America because there's more white people. But per capita, I think you'll find a comparable amount of racism in other races. Also, it's racism that's encouraged and fostered, especially on social media. Like, it's not true. If you're a black person and you tweet out something anti-white, like I'm so sick and tired of white people, you're gonna get 50,000, 100,000 likes, retweets. There's gonna be a party thrown for you. It's just not true, and it happens all the time.
Yeah, but you were talking about systemic. You were talking about systemic power, and obviously, like
that is systemic power. That's what I'm saying. That's the system that I live, operate, and work in. In that system,
what is the
Gambit
outcome?
Can go.
What's the negative result? Like the tangible
you lose your job. You've already asked. This is the third time you've asked this question. I answered.
No, you don't lose
time.
your job if some random person tweets out "fuck white people" and they get 100,000 likes. You don't lose your job.
It's not good.
Steven got banned from Twitch. People get banned from these platforms all the time for being the wrong color in the wrong cyber alleyway.
I don't know how you would go about even establishing that. I mean, there have been people who've been canceled and fired before for
so this is why my first question
was been fired over. But
this is why my first question was to nail you down and get you to say there is anti-white sentiment, and a lot of it happens on social media.
You didn't
and
have
Twitter.
to nail me down. That was the first thing I said.
I know, but now you're saying it's consequence free. Like, it's not. Like we generally, I don't think the six of us are generally violent criminals or drug dealers who are going to really feel, or poor people who really are going to feel the effects of systemic racism. I think that we are going to feel the effects of systemic racism against white people due to the systems that we generally spend time in. So you can say, Gambit, you can say like, yeah, if a black person goes out and is racist, that's gonna hurt them or hurt their lives. But that's in our circles, that's not as true.
Well, what about, Hunter, you mentioned, I'll go back to systemic racism against white people. What about hiring quotas, diversity quotas? Those all affect, the middle class, slightly above. What do you think about that? Does that qualify as systemic racism? Preferential hiring towards minorities?
I mean, I would want to see individual examples of that, but it could absolutely qualify. It's my understanding that quotas are usually not very accepted. If we're talking about something like affirmative action, which I hear people bring up quite a lot, that I did a little bit of digging into it today, actually, and it's much more focused on broadening the net so that it works to expand opportunity rather than just giving preferential treatment to minority groups. But if there were something that were happening where they were refusing to hire white people, then yeah, that would be another system. That in that case, that is a system that is not only disproportionately negatively affecting white people, you can point to the actual harm there. Now we see white people less likely to get jobs because they're white. That would be a tangible harm. That would be a systemic inequality against white people. So if you could demonstrate that, then I would absolutely easily say
we don't need to demonstrate it. You already know this. We already have two groups of people, white people and black people. One is allowed to complain about the other on Twitter and have nothing bad happen to them. And the other, you will lose your Twitter. You'll lose any other social media.
These things. No, stop. You realize that making a dumbass tweet on Twitter is not the same as an employer not hiring people because they're white.
You are obfuscating the point by calling the tweet dumbass. The point is that black people are allowed to say dumb things about white people on Twitter, and white people are not allowed to say dumb things about black people on Twitter. We can just put the word dumb in there if it makes you feel better. Yeah. But the point is that on Twitter and social media sites, you do not have certain rights that I have even.
Y'all have to agree with the broader point that he's trying to make, right? The point that he's making is in social spaces, anti-white racism is more accepted than other types of racism. And I think we all agree with that.
I'm pretty sure I already agreed with this like 3 times. Yeah, of course. Yeah,
but you keep saying it's consequence free. Like it just doesn't.
Wait, hold on. No. I never said it was consequence free. I was talking about systemic inequality. specifically. It's not
But you keep
completely
saying, show me the negative
free.
outcome.
You're
like,
hold on.
where are the negative outcomes? And like,
The negative outcome of the
I think the
actual
summary
system,
of this
sure,
issue is
but-
it's the Invincible comic where there's like the 52 slurs for white people in the background, and then the guy in front is like the N-word, and he's like, look at what I need just to match a fraction of our power, right? There is obviously some anti-white racism and anti-white sentiment that exists in groups, but it's not as bad as like the historic systemic injustices that have other minority people have faced in the United States. I think we can accept all of these statements as true, right?
Yes, and
somebody
also,
calling
just
me
to
the
add
C
on
word
that-
on Twitter is not the end of my day, and at the end of the day, it really doesn't affect me that much. But it is pretty fucking annoying. They could be outwardly racist towards me, and if I were to say anything remotely back, it would be fuck, right?
Yeah, and if I could
yeah,
just
okay.
further address what Mr. Girl said a second ago, it is not consequence-free in the sense that if you are a white person on Twitter and you are being, and people are tweeting racial slurs at you all day because you're white, then yes, that of course is not consequence-free. That's going to negatively impact the person who you are acting racist towards. What I said was that it's far less likely to result in a systemic problem, which means a broad issue that affects white people again on a large statistical level.
I think,
Well,
you think that's what.
Well, just one
Hold
more
on,
thing.
you let Gambit
You can
get in
you
there,
can
Gambit.
point
What were
to
you
system. You can point to systemic inequality, large groups of black people that are harmed by the institution of the criminal justice system right now. You cannot point to that when it comes to Twitter. That's all. I'm just trying to distinguish between those things.
I think the problem he's having is it feels like you're not sympathetic because you're trying to extrapolate to the systemic level when he's talking about the harm and the abuse that it takes on that specific individual. So I think that's why I think Mr. Girl agrees with everything that you're saying, but I think the way you're framing it and trying to expand to systemic problems and trying to compare it to anti-black racism, I think that's where y'all are actually having a problem with.
Because
Yeah, I
it's a
don't think
different
Mr.
system.
World-
Like you're saying that I can't talk because black people are over policed and over sentenced.
I never said this. That you are literally
It's a justification.
No, it's not.
I can draw the line.
Max,
Okay, you want to
I
see? You want to play connect the dots, Hunter?
that this was
play
not a
Connect? Unhinged.
justification.
Yeah, I just
I
wanted to.
specifically said this was not a justification.
You can. That's fine if you say that, but your argument is that it is. Because when I say,
No,
"Hey, let's
it's
talk
not.
about Twitter," you're like, "Let's talk about jail."
No, I'm simply
stop
talking
talking-
about a
then it doesn't-
difference between systemic inequality and racism on an interpersonal level.
Do you agree that Twitter is? Do you
Hmm?
agree that Twitter is a different system from the criminal justice system?
Yes.
Do you agree that this system of Twitter disproportionately negatively punishes and sanctions and kicks out and silences white people?
I think that on Twitter, that system, it's more acceptable to have anti-white sentiment. Yes. I don't know if there are people who are kicked off Twitter for being white. I don't know about that.
I'm not saying for being white. I'm saying for saying the same. Okay. You're just switching the definitions around. If I say the same, if you say something and Gambit says something, and you get punished and he doesn't, were you punished because you were white? But you're going to say no. I was punished for saying something stupid. But you understand that another way of saying that is just that black people have certain rights on social media platforms that white people do not have.
Sure.
Okay. So within that system, the system that I think I spend more time on Twitter than I spend in jail or in court. So that system, the systemic racism that affects white people is the systemic racism that I spend the most time around.
Okay. I guess maybe there was just a miscommunication. I was never trying to offer a justification for any kind of racism directed at white people.
I know you're not, but you keep saying, okay, but show me the negative outcome of that. And then you say, well, because there's worse shit happening to black people in jail. So
I was simply trying to make
Twitter. It feels
right. And I can understand why maybe it did come across that way. I was simply trying to, for the sake of argument, lay out how there are differences between systemic inequalities and interpersonal inequalities. That's all I was trying to do. Are there still inequalities against white people on Twitter? Yes. Is that bad? Yes.
I think something
So
that
I'm
we
agreeing
could
with you there.
we could take it one step farther if we wanted to, and we could defend also the argument that Hunter isn't making. He hasn't said this, but we could say that maybe if interpersonal bigotry, we'll say, becomes accepted enough on a cultural level, at some point that might that might actually come out as some sort of systemic like inequality. So one example of this maybe, or at the very least it prevents something from being addressed. I can think of two examples of this. One on a broad level is women are massively outperforming men in school now. Like 60-40. It's insane. The graduation rates have gotten insane. And every time we hit an economic downturn, men get fucked even more and more and more. And because of the interpersonal bigotry that we've allowed, we can't actually have a conversation about that. I've had 2 school administrator people, and maybe this is just by my sample size, maybe, but I've had 2 people email me and say, I think one was on stream, and I think one emailed me. They said that you can't have this conversation. Like the idea of even bringing it up, it's just nobody wants to talk about it. And then the second thing is, I guess this doesn't count as like an institutional thing quite as much, but there was a black man that was shot by the police after I think like a 6-hour standoff outside some lady's apartment, where this guy had shot into the apartment like 10 times or something, missed the lady's kids, and eventually the police had to shoot and kill this guy. This guy, his family started a GoFundMe for him and raised like, I think over $100,000 for the guy that was shooting into the woman's apartment. And like the woman is standing outside like crying as people are protesting outside her apartment. She's like, guys, this guy was shooting into my house trying to kill my family. What the fuck? And they're like, well, you're still alive, you're white, blah, 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 or some shit like that. I was like, what the fuck?
I remember that.
Yeah, that's insane. Now, maybe that one thing doesn't necessarily count as systemic, but like reverse the roles, and this is never happening, right?
That's still fucked up.
Let me refocus.
That happening in reverse, but yeah.
Let me refocus your question, because I think you're hitting on the next question that MrGirl has here for discussion. It is, should people of other races have empathy for white people and their experience of being white? Among them, some of the reasons why you just said. Gambit, go ahead. Go for it.
Yeah, I would say yes, and it's a lot of because of what Destiny just said. So, like, I'm from a rural area, so I know a lot of, like, poor or, like, lower middle class white people, and a lot of them feel like the system isn't, and I don't know if I necessarily agree, but I can definitely empathize with some of their thoughts. But a lot of them feel like they've been looked over, and it's like, oh yeah, you have this privilege, and even though you're poor, it's probably your fault because you're white, so you should have made it. So there's lots of poor white people that feel like the system is not designed to work for them, and it's designed to work for others because of historic problems. So I definitely empathize with those people. And like, and it is crazy because like, I know a particular guy who, I don't want to go into the story, but I know a particular guy who deal with situations, and he specifically doesn't want social policies that would help him because he feels like they're only doing it to help others. And like, I see a lot of poor white people fall into that trap where the systemic things that could help them in their situation, they'd much rather not have anything because of the perceived notion that it's going for others and things like that. But for sure, yeah, I think we should empathize with people in those situations that are looked at as looked over. Honestly.
Lord, I'm going to throw it to you next. Should people of other races have empathy for white people and their experience of being white?
Yeah, I think so, because I think there's this really, really stupid response that comes from the left to like the white grievance thing and the way it works to get people like Trump or Bolsonaro or Boris Johnson. And it's like people will say we should just stop talking about race and only make it about class. I don't think that works for like a number of reasons, and that is kind of one of them, is really understanding that like white working class and like black and Hispanic working class people actually have a lot of common interest. And yeah, like those, like in order for any kind of opposition to like right-wing backlash to work, is like those groups kind of need to understand each other. So yeah.
How do you think that would work? Having empathy, expressing it for white people and their experience of being white. You covered a lot of things, classes, Trump versus Bolsonaro. What do you think the steps toward that would be?
I don't know. I think one thing you can do is trying to stop letting the right do this thing where they try to treat like racial equality as a kind of zero-sum game, even when it looks a lot like it. So like reparations would obviously cost white taxpayers, but then the whole intention behind it is that you don't have neighborhoods that are riddled with crime. You don't have like drug problems and things like that. So it's like, and this is the kind of thing that right-wingers complain about. So I think, yeah, people need to kind of like approach things in ways it's not just about like racial justice should not be about like white people, regardless of their status, just degrading themselves so that black people can rise up or Hispanic people can rise up. I don't think that's, but a lot of people sell it that way, which is like a right winger might fearmonger about that. And then the left response might be, well, yeah, good, white privilege, get fucked. But yeah, I think that's like the biggest problem.
Do people of color have any moral obligation or responsibility to think or talk about this? So white people are supposed to be anti-racist, right? If you're not anti-racist, you're racist. You're part of the problem. You're sitting there enjoying this. You might as well be a fucking KKK member. So does the same go for people of color? If you're in a place where people of color are advantaged, do you have a moral obligation to speak up for white people or empathize with white people actively? I say yes.
What, should like more black people stand up to or stand up for white people to get banned on Twitter or whatever?
Yes.
So, yeah. So I would say this, like, I try to definitely stand up for injustices that I see. I will say that if you were to look at the things that I talk about most frequently, I think the things that impact Black people are more, I think I don't want to say more harmful, but that sounds but I think there are tons of things that
everybody else is saying it. You might as well say it too, Gambit. That's what everybody is fucking saying. This entire panel.
So no, but to answer your question, like specifically, yes, I think that if there are injustices in our society, we all should be trying to point those out. I think that the reason you may not see that is because there could be other problems that are also present, and that could be pulling attention away from those people who would stand up and say more.
Wait. It'll be pulling attention away from who?
Yeah, so imagine if I think like anti-white racism is a problem, and I think like anti-Black racism is a problem, it's possible that I could see that anti-Black racism impacts me more, which results in like me talking about anti-white racism more. That doesn't mean that I don't stand in solidarity with people that are pointing those issues out, though.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah. But yes, to answer your question specifically, I think everybody would agree that if there's injustices in our society, regardless of your demographic, you should be attempting to alleviate that, right?
I guess it depends on what you mean by injustices. Does anybody not agree with that? I mean, Loner, you mentioned reparations, which is a surprise. You're talking about American reparations, I suppose. Is that something that everyone is universally for? Paying reparations at this point?
I have no idea I'd imagine not. I've not looked at polling on it, but yeah.
Personally,
that's the problem. I'm talking about like the way people sell it, right? So like another example is you mentioned affirmative action or quotas or something like that. And I mean, like we do that in the UK, especially for like the Muslim community or thereabouts. But the reason they do it is because people in like if you have like a Middle Eastern name, you're more likely to not get hired. Like there've been a lot of studies with that. So the problem then as well is that a big white grievance in the UK is that Muslim communities are very segregated and they're very ghettoized and very like in enclaves. But of course you're going to be in enclaves if there's not really any social mobility. So I think a result of maybe like the last 10, 15 years of quotas and affirmative action towards that community is that recent polling has shown that like British Muslims feel kind of better than ever living in the UK, and also racism towards them has kind of gone down as well. So but that's the thing. I wish people could just frame it in a way that doesn't mean white give to brown and black, you know?
Yeah.
How would you phrase it? Go ahead, Gambit.
Oh, no. I was just agreeing, man.
Yeah. Is everyone on board with that? MrGirl,
you guys know the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League?
Oh, God, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's like these Jews who are so afraid of another Hitler, another Holocaust, that they see anti-Semitism as like a wick that's lit and it's burning, and they got to go pour water on it. Every time they see it, they're like, no, you don't understand where it goes. We understand where it goes. You don't understand where it goes. And I feel like, Hunter, I'm still mad at you about what you said 20 minutes ago. I feel like when you say, well, show me the consequences, I feel like if only you were a Jew, you would understand and see that this can lead to really bad things, especially if it's unchecked. And we've gotten to a point where if you advocate for white people, you are racist, especially if you're white. But even like what Gambit just said, even him saying like, yeah, well, you know, even kind of like back equivocating a little bit and saying like, well, everybody should stand up for everybody. Even that could get Gambit called like a white supremacist, apologist, conservative asshole. So I think we should also be talking not just about current consequences, but consequences down the line as white people are defined increasingly, especially on the left, as like second-class citizens or like targets.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I would agree with that for the most part. Yeah. Sorry that you're still mad at me, though.
You can't control my feelings. That's it's just part of political discourse.
Okay, well, I mean, I'm starting to feel kind of guilty, mostly because I'm white, but I mean, partially because I hurt your feelings. So
no, you didn't hurt my feelings. You touched a nerve, but I don't expect to not get mad, and I don't hold you responsible for my outbursts.
Here's a question about guilt, Hunter. Maybe this will help you work out your white guilt. Do you think white people should feel guilty about slavery? Is there pressure for white people to pretend to feel guilty?
No white people should feel guilty about slavery. If they do, then most likely they are just virtue signaling or LARPing around trying to get brownie points from their other like privileged friends or something. No, nobody should feel guilty for things that they themselves have not done. As far as recognizing that slavery had negative impacts that still are negatively impacting Black people today, that is a different question. And that, I think, is a fine thing. But no, if anybody's feeling guilty because they're white and white people did slavery, then no, that they are very lost. That's never the right answer.
Does everyone agree with that? No white people should feel guilty about slavery?
I mean, it depends on what we mean by feel guilty. I mean, like, you can feel bad about it, but like, the problem is the word guilt implies some sort of moral responsibility. Like, if somebody tells me, like, hey, you were driving last night and you happened to like run over my cat, even though you didn't see it or nothing happened. Like, I'd feel guilty about it, but like, I don't know if that's like my responsibility or something. It's like you can feel bad about things that have happened to people in the past. Maybe even a little guilty that you've assumed a better position in society as a result of like, who you were born to or what area, what zip code you're in or what country you're in or whatever. But right. Insofar as like that guilt implies some level of moral culpability or responsibility, that's probably not good. And we don't have different words to describe different types of guilt, I think.
Yeah, I think that when you asked even at the guilt question, I was instantly assuming like a personal guilt. Like, should I feel personally guilty for slavery because I'm a white person? No, then I would stick with my original take, of course.
So you feel sort of go ahead, Gambit. What do you think about the guilt?
I was trying to work out how I feel, and I think I feel exactly what Hunter said. And I think that's maybe what most people don't say correctly, but yeah, it's not that we want people to feel personally guilty, but we want people to sympathize with or empathize with the impacts that it had and understand how those things can still be affecting Black people today. So yeah, I don't want anybody to be like at home crying, oh my God, it's like no, we just want people to understand that and voice that to people that don't recognize that that's the thing.
I think in a way, some of the shaming rhetoric around slavery do we all agree that there is some degree of progressives like guilt tripping white people about slavery?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah,
I think
or there's like a modern take on it too.
Oh God, don't Gambit. Oh no. There are the Black progressives will guilt trip you about slavery.
Yeah, there's like the modern take on it is anytime you ever hear the C word, people are usually trying to allude to stuff like that. Colonialism. That's like another big way that people have found like shit on white people is that word. Yeah, because because when you're talking about colonialism, you're only talking about white people colonialism, and it's usually just like I guess a dog whistle, for like shitting on white people.
It is. Yeah, it's an anti-white dog whistle. Wow.
There's so many C words. I never know which one you guys are going to talk about. Every time you say it, it was the wrong one.
Not your favorite one. That's probably not going to come up in this discussion.
How do you think that guilt, that feeling of guilt, is used against people, though? I don't know if everyone's so sophisticated with their feelings that they can express the difference between guilt as a person and guilt as a group. What do you think about that?
I think it backfires because it's and I think this has led to a lot of racism against Black people on the right, when in order to empathize with Black people, you also have to say that you did slavery and you're sorry. And when those ideas are packaged together, I think that it hurts everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I would think so as well. I mean, I think that if we want to acknowledge some of the issues that are still affecting Black people today from the past, the first thing that should be done is make sure that people don't feel like they are somehow personally responsible for this. Because the minute you try to guilt somebody or try to make them feel like this is all just white people's fault, like as in you are living as a white person today, you should somehow feel guilty. If anything, that's going to just lead to more resistance towards the end goal.
How do you square the idea of reparations?
I'm not really in favor of reparations. I mean, I never talked about it on the panel or anything, but yeah, I'm
not either. No. I don't mean you specifically. I don't mean you. How do you square your idea? But like what I'm trying to get at is reparations, which is essentially a financial transfer from white people to Black people.
Mm-hmm.
Is that like a settling a lawsuit? What?
I said it's based.
It's based.
I think you can make one good argument for reparations, I think. And that's
how do you make an argument for reparations that does not also blame white people for slavery?
I'm about to. Okay. So the one good argument you can make for reparations is that if it was the case that at times in the US history there were promises made, people go back and forth about like 40 acres and a mule or whatever. If those promises were made, then there's an argument that those promises ought to be kept. Now, it's not white people that has to pay it. It's not because of slavery. It would be the United States government that has a general fund paid into by all sorts of different people paying on past dues. It doesn't really have to do with the fact they're Black, kind of, but like not really. It's just the fact there's a group of people, treaties were made or deals were made and they were broken. And if that is the case, and if that can be proved, and we all feel comfortable about that, then I think that paying something back for that is okay. I think that's an okay thing.
Yeah, Mr. If you found out that like there were Black veterans that were promised. We can talk recent stuff. Well, this is relatively recent, not really recent. But if we say that there were Black veterans that were promised money during the 60s and 70s, right? And those people are still alive, and we know those people's names, and we know that the government made them promises, but we know that disproportionately they weren't allowed to receive the funding that they were expected. You would say that paying those individuals what they are rightfully owed, like what Destiny just called out, you would say that that's a fair thing, right?
Yes.
So you do believe in some form of reparations. So when people say they don't believe in reparations, I have no idea what's in your mind, right?
Wait. I believe in I believe that people should be paid the money owed to them. The question is, are the descendants of slaves owed money?
I mean,
not just for being slaves. Maybe it would be for like deals on the book, things that you could trace, right? That would probably be how it would go.
I think there's so many other things that are less complicated than talking about, let's go all the way back to slavery, right? We can talk about like the denial of loans and a bunch of things. Like
walk me down the chain of logic. I'm going with you.
So if we talk about like redlining, right, and how Black people were disproportionately put into areas that had low economic opportunity and were systemically denied through banks, through government policy. If we can point to those things, we can say these people were denied this because of their color. You would say that those things it's just like the Japanese during. You don't think so?
I think that would be a civil court matter, not like a policy of the U.S. government. Like if you could prove that somebody, did something, because
I can't remember exactly. This was dealing with the federal government as well, not just. Are
you talking about redlining specifically? Because it was the Federal Housing Administration. Yeah.
Well, wait, hold on. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. I thought that redlining, it might have been like an approved practice, but at the end of the day, it was private banks and stuff that were making the decisions on who not to loan money to. No.
I'm not ready to have that debate right now, but yes,
it's all theoretical. I think we're just trying to figure out where each. The
government were doing to influence the culture that accepted banks not. Let's put
it this way. None of us want to give the whole country back to the Native Americans, right? None of us want to leave, right? We took it. It's ours. We've had it for a while, and like it's not really rightfully ours, but we're keeping it because we really like this place. We've been here for a while, so we're keeping it. So we've gone from squatters to owners. So at a certain point, none of us believe in reparations, and we all believe that if you walk out of a bank and then somebody chases after you and says, hey, I just want to let you know that like because of your race, that's why your application was denied. We all agree that the bank should pay you back. So we all believe in reparations. So the question is, where does the gravy train get derailed for each of us?
I would say if you're just going to start paying reparations like just across the board to black people, I think that would probably be like ridiculous. I think that I really agree with what Destiny said, is there should be some kind of evidence that something was denied to black people, and that is why then we are basically making up for a past wrong. And I guess this kind of goes into what we were saying a second ago about redlining. It was somewhat on a local level. There were local levels, state levels, but there was also federal segregation that played a huge role as well. For example, the Federal Housing Administration subsidized builders so long as they would only sell those houses to white people. So there was definitely some pretty blatant racism on the books that's been depicted here. So I mean, maybe we could look at that direction, but yeah, like if it's across the board, that would be ridiculous.
But would we also agree that a broad transfer of money to black people now
will be based,
even if some of us would like it, also is a little racist, even if there's a justification for doing so, that to poor white people.
No, I think this
just the idea that like it because of why you're poor.
No. Wait. This is why it's so important. Wait, this is why you have to have my perspective. Any other perspective fails. Yeah. It has to.
I don't have to have your perspective.
If you want to make the argument, it does. It can't be because of race, and it can't be because of past wrongs. It has to be because a specific agreement was broken. If you get reparations or whatever, it's not because you were a slave, and it's not because you had a bad history because of slavery. It's because the government made a deal with you and went back on it. They broke it. That's the only way you can do it. Yeah.
To the poor.
Wait, is that what they did to? Is that what they did in Germany with the reparations to Jews?
No, Japanese Americans, right, during the World War, right? Like there were reparations paid. Well, I mean, I guess you don't have the right to be seized without proper investigation, right? But those people were given reparations due to what happened during the World War, right? Because they were wrong, like criminally, but it wasn't like necessarily a financial transaction that was.
I think that was a little different though, because they were able to solve it like immediately. Like if the federal government did something bad like right now, and we want to talk about kind of reparations, that's fine. But when we talk about reparations for slavery,
wait, I have a couple. If black people were richer than white people now,
yes, you would still be paid back. Yeah.
Would you? No. Would we be having this conversation?
We probably wouldn't be having the conversation, but you should still be paid back.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so to some extent, even though you can come up with a justification for reparations, to some extent, it is an attempt to remedy the plight of the black man.
No,
today.
It's not. I've never said that.
I'm not saying you're saying that. I'm not saying you're saying that. I'm saying it's true, because if black people were really rich, we wouldn't be talking about giving them reparations.
True. That's why I'm saying those are dog shit arguments. If you're making that type of an argument, then you're.
I'm not making an argument. I'm
not saying you are. But I'm saying you're attacking an argument that no one else is making because it's a dog shit argument. If you're trying to, you keep saying that like,
I'm not
like you can't.
The argument.
But then why even bring it up?
Because while you are making a compelling argument for reparations, you are smuggling in why we're even talking about the reparations in the first place.
I'm not smuggling that in. It's part of the conversation. If you want to ask the whole panel, is anybody here in favor of just paying black people back because they were wronged without like any extra qualification? Besides Gambit.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that as the representative, the sole defender of the white man on the fucking panel now, I want to point out that the only reason we're talking about reparations for black people is because we're trying to find a justifiable reason to transfer money to black people and not white people that makes sense. And while you are very good at articulating and coming up with those justifications, the task at hand is how can we give these poor black people some money and have it like not piss off white people too much? I don't think there's an answer to that question, because it will and probably should piss off poor white people. I think we want to give poor.
If we're taking Destiny's approach, maybe, this isn't exactly Destiny's approach, because Destiny, you said if it was a promise that we then went back on, there are a lot of places where we might actually be in favor of reparations where there was never actually a promise made that they then went back on.
Exactly.
It could just be like something with redlining, which deliberately was an effort by the federal government that we have on the books, which showed that they were purposely trying to further segregate America.
Yeah, I understand, but the problem is that it's shitty, but like we're a democracy. If that's what we decided at the time was fine, then I mean, like if we were to go back and we were to redo every single, or pay somebody back for every single unfair law or whatever, I don't know, like Native Americans would be impacted, probably Asian Americans would be impacted, Irish.
Yeah, what I'm saying is that if we were going to take the approach of something like, for example, redlining, and we were simply going to say, here is a policy that disproportionately fucked over black people, I don't think it should just be black people that get reparations. I think it should be, if we're going to go that route, it should also apply to white people who were fucked over by redlining also, because white people were screwed over by redlining as well, just not to the same degree.
Yeah, just not disproportionate. Yeah.
It shouldn't be on the basis of race, no matter
there's
what.
Nobody. But Hunter,
Cindy,
there's nobody.
You don't agree with any of the reparations that we paid to Native Americans? A lot of it was due to just.
Did we pay reparations to Native Americans, or did we just finally give them some land to set their shit up on?
That's a form of reparations too. Reparations doesn't necessarily mean money. But that's a form of reparations as well. There's multiple reparations that we, not saying that we've given enough for somebody to try to clip me out of context, blah, blah, blah. I don't want to get in that argument, but we have given Native Americans things because of historic wrongs that have happened that aren't due to broken promises.
Yeah, it's just when you start getting into like U.S. policies, I don't even know how you would even start to get into like who caused what wrong for what reason. It just seems like it'd be so hard.
You can empathize with, you can agree with the idea that there can be a historic wrong that happened that wasn't due to like some sort of financial agreement that in which we should pay reparations, right?
That's the hard one, like, because there were probably genuinely, this is the most racist conservative talking point, but there were generally probably some black people that wouldn't have qualified for a loan or wouldn't have qualified for a mortgage in some areas, right? But so like, how do you begin to make the determination of like, well, who got racially affected by redlining?
That's what we get a committee together for, a Senate committee together for, and they figured it out. But I'm saying you can agree with the idea that you can do a wrong to a certain demographic of people, and you could give reparations just because a wrong was done, not necessarily due to a financial transaction that you didn't uphold, right? You agree with that, right?
I don't know.
But like, there's nobody.
I don't know. I think. Wait. I think.
We have no grievance panel, though. I'm just letting y'all know who winning the reparation. But go ahead. I'll stay here.
This whole kind of concern. I don't know about the concern about like, so if we give like reparations out too broad, they might go to people who didn't really have them coming. But I guess that's kind of like saying like, should we really like impose sanctions on this nation because it might affect people who live in that nation who have nothing to do with what that nation's guilty of doing. So, but I think that's the point of like it's never going to be like this perfectly clean thing. Yeah. But I think an example of it succeeding would be like Germany, right? Because I wish I could remember, but I think in Germany they didn't. It wasn't just Holocaust survivors who got reparations. It was Jewish organizations that were started after the Holocaust, and it was also about like monuments and memorials and museums, and like they built those stepping stones. So like outside every house of every Jew that died, there's like a stone that has like where they were born, where they died, what their name was. But as far as I know, that was quite successful, wasn't it? Because like the anti-Semitism is not.
But when did they do that? Yeah, but that we're talking about the proximity to.
They're still doing this like to this day. I think it's like $100 billion now.
Exactly the right group of people to pay back, right? We all agree that there's going to be some inefficiency in selection, and there will be a group of people who may not have deserved it that get it. But because we feel like we're correcting a wrong, that's why we go on that endeavor, right? Like, it's never going to be the case that, oh yeah, we found the names of the 57 people we need to give reparations to, and it's only them, and we did it through all of this analysis, right? There's going to be some broad, in some ways, there's going to be inefficiency or broadening, whereas we give to a group, and it may be that some of them didn't deserve it, right? We never split hairs like this in reparations.
That's not my problem with it, though.
Okay.
I'm not afraid of black people who didn't like. I don't care about that.
I'm afraid of black people.
Well, sure.
My question is like,
especially today.
If we start to do like really broad reparations to just anybody who kind of qualifies as being black, like. At what point is it justified? Well, at what point is it justified for me to do blackface? Like maybe I'm.
Oh wait, hold on. It wouldn't be to black people. We're not talking about black people right now for reparations. It would be for African Americans. It'd be descendants.
Well, I just mean on a broad. If we were going to go for the direction of broad.
Okay. Here's my problem with reparations. My problem is that it just seems like a rationalization for giving money to black people.
Do you think the same about reparations to Jews? And
I just wanted to do blackface. I'm sorry.
I don't think the same thing about reparations to Jews who are actually Holocaust survivors. No.
Okay.
And I think that reparations should have been paid to black people after they were freed. I would definitely agree with that. But I think now, if in 200 years, a bunch of Jews are like, we should get some money from the German government. We should get money from the German government. Then we didn't get our money. They didn't pay enough reparations, and I traced back my family. And you know what? I found out this was stolen. This was stolen. I have an itemized list of like things that were stolen from my great grandmother, and I want my money back. Then I would say no.
Okay, yeah, but I don't think anyone's saying that. Right,
I want to make sure you understand this, Mr. Girl. Most people aren't arguing the position that you're arguing against right now. Most people.
Let me explain my position because I don't think I'm getting it across correctly.
Okay. Cool.
I understand that there is a sound, logical chain that you can follow to justify reparations, and that it makes sense and it's full of good arguments that are inarguable, and that you can come up with good analogies for all of them. My problem is, why are we making the arguments and why is the question being asked in the first place? I don't think anybody is looking through Hunter's lineage to go back and find out if some government and some place screwed over his family and if he should get a check for some reason. And I don't think he cares about that. So so while you can come up with a justification for it that is sensible and makes sense and sounds like good policy, my problem with it is that I don't think we're really talking about why we're even trying to come up with that justification. And it seems like the answer is because black people are poor on average, poorer than white people. We're trying to give them money. And if black people weren't poor on average, I think we've all conceded that we wouldn't even be trying to figure out a way to transfer the money.
So I can help you there. I can help you there. If Hunter had a big enough family that was a big enough demographic in our country, and we could trace the wrong that you just talked about to Hunter's family that's probably still living or something, we would agree with reparations for that group of people, right? So I think the problem is
I wouldn't. No, at a certain point, I'm like you. What every fucking person in the country can or every person on Earth can come up with some wrong that was done to their ancestors by a government, and then honor.
Yeah, you said ancestors, right? You continually switch the context to
keep in mind that we do some form of reparations. Conservatives will not hear one word of complaining
I'm trying to make a meta. I'm trying to explain my problem. My problem with the argument has nothing to do with the contents. Wait, will you just let me? Will you? Dick, make him stop.
Go ahead.
Please.
He's laughing. Go.
Wait. Okay. Wait. Okay. Wait. Can I do this for 2 seconds? Because hold on. We're arguing so much about. We're arguing so much about nothing. We're arguing about so much about nothing. Okay. We all agree, Mr. Girl. Everybody agrees with you. The only reason we're having this conversation is because black people are really poor today, and it seems like one of the reasons why is because of systemic injustice that happened in the past. But if they weren't poor today, we wouldn't be having this conversation. We all agree with that.
Okay. Great.
Yes.
So this is the ball of arguments that make up why we should do reparations.
Still going to explain it again. Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to explain it again. This is the ball of arguments. Everything within this ball is why we should give black people reparations. And or how, I guess the rationalization for it. And I'm trying to make a meta argument of like, well, why do we have the ball out? And Stephen, as you just said, it's because black people are poor. We want to give money to them. Every time I make a meta argument, every time I make a meta argument, one of you fucks dives back into the ball and starts making internal arguments that I've already conceded to you. So stop doing that. And engage with the meta, because the meta is the problem. The meta is the reason that white people have grievance about reparations for black people. You're just trying to give money to black people. You have all this mental gymnastics you can do to show why it's okay. But at the end of the day, you're going to give money to poor black people and not to poor white people. And I want an explanation of why that is the case without diving into the ball. And I don't think that there is. I don't think there really is one.
Arguments become bad. Yes. If you remove all context, yes, it's impossible to make a good argument. For sure, but that's what you're attempting to do.
No, it's not. I'm saying that the arguments about the mechanism of reparations are solid. My problem is, why are we using the mechanism? And if the answer is just because black people are poor, then maybe we should just give money to poor people instead of poor black people, because the government played a hand in the government plays a hand in everybody's lives. Like it's every poor person in the country is poor. You could frame it as they're poor because the government let them get poor, and whether they did it by chaining them up and whipping them, or whether they did it by sending them to jail or denying a housing application or not their power shut off at a crucial time in their life and they lost a job opportunity. The government plays a hand in all of our lives. So to say that we've come up with this super specific reason and very obvious, like colorful reason for why we should give money to black people obfuscates the fact that we're just trying to give money to black people and not to white people.
I think Destiny has said some things pretty succinctly, and I don't think we're going to arrive anywhere. I don't think we're going anywhere. Right?
I mean, I think we all.
Would this logic follow for other paths wrongs, such as such for poor communities?
I think we all agree that we're only talking about this because black people are poor. MrGirl's contention is, if that's the meta conversation we're having, then shouldn't we just broaden the conversation to all poor people? The reason why we don't have that meta conversation is because we are talking about black people because they are poor, but the reason why they're poor is because they are black people. And that's what makes it more special here. There weren't policies on the book. There weren't policies on the book to discriminate against poor people when we talk about like redlining and stuff. There were policies on the book to discriminate against black people. So when we're talking about a group of people that are poor and we want to address the grievances of that group of poor people, we're not going to address the grievances of all of poor people if that specific group of people are poor because people have targeted them in the past on a characteristic like their blackness. We'll probably focus on that characteristic that was targeted when we go to address those grievances going forward.
I also want to chime in there because I think MrGirl I don't really disagree with you. I just think you're kind of doing the thing again where when you suggest this idea of let's just go for poor people and not black people, I think the problem with that is it doesn't actually get rid of white grievance, I don't think. Because the problem is that if you target...
I don't want to do it to get rid of white grievance.
Yeah, okay, but like... I think it's just acknowledging that that's why I think like the race and class thing kind of needs to it can't really ever be disconnected, right? Because I guess white people who are poor, they're poor as well, but for different reasons, and there might be like a different
solution. So fuck them, right?
No, not fuck them. Like the solution to their poverty is not reparations, right? Like there's something else that needs to be done. Like,
I don't think the solution to black people's also, people were enslaved. If there were a bunch of rich black people living in Africa, I don't think they would be enslaved. Africans were enslaving each other. That wasn't because they were black. It's because they were poor.
So let's say,
you can make an argument that class underlies all of this.
No, it doesn't. That's the point. So let's say that you have 100 people, okay? 50 white, 50 black. Let's say that you set these people in the world, you give the 50 white people $1 million, and you give the 50 black people $1,000 in debt. Let's say that we run that experiment, and after 100 years, we check in on both groups. Let's say 95% of the white people are wealthy, and let's say that 80% of the black people are poor. And now we're looking at these groups and we're like, well, fuck, how do we rectify these problems? Well, it's tempting to say, well, even though most of the black people are poor, there are still some poor white people. We should just target the poor people and fix the problem. What other people will say is, well, hold on. Yeah, there are some poor white people and there are some poor black people, but a lot of the poverty from these black people wasn't just because they were poor. It's because somebody in the very beginning specifically fucked them up due to them being black. And if they were initially set back due to being black, when we go to address these grievances, shouldn't we specifically pay them back because they're black?
Okay, I have two responses.
Go.
One is no. I think we should be focused, and this is why I brought the white guilt thing into this. I think we should be focused on what is going to help the most people, not what is going to make us feel better. And I think that I understand the justification, but I still think we should just help all poor people as much as we can, regardless of why they became poor.
So
and
let's talk about.
Second of all, let me can I just make my second point, Dick? Will you please help me?
Go for it.
Please help me. Okay, my second point is that again, black people were not given $1,000 in debt in your analogy simply because they're black. In your analogy, they were, but they weren't enslaved because they're black. They were enslaved because they're poor. The slaves that we bought from Africa were already enslaved by other Africans, right? And they were not enslaved because they were black. They were enslaved because they were poor.
In the United States, like the whole point of like indentured servitude was that like you could never buy your way out. Like you could the institution of slavery in the United States wasn't just for poor people. It was pretty specifically for black people. I know there were some white slaves in the United States, but overwhelmingly, like this was a racialized kind of thing.
I know, but I just don't think
As soon as you go one generation after 1619, then yeah, like if you're a slave, it's because you're black in America, right? Like within the United States, because that's what we're talking about.
I think this will help Mr. Girl out. So, Mr. Girl, let's take Destiny's example where he said there were 50 white people and there were 50 black people, and we came back. Now, imagine if you set these things into motion that Destiny said, and imagine when you come back, for some reason there's equal representation of poor people because imagine that so this is what we got to change about Destiny's example. Imagine there were 100 white people instead of 50 and 50. So there were 100 white people and then there were 50 black people. Now imagine you come back and there's 50 poor black people and there's 50 poor white people and there's 50 rich white people, because the population sizes don't actually match, which is why I had to change his analogy just a little bit. Now imagine if you only try to solve for poorness, those disadvantaged black people, specifically because of their race, can be overlooked as the population size grows. So if you're in a sufficient part of the population, then your grievances that you are somewhat trying to correct because you're trying to make poor people better, those grievances aren't addressed because you're helping a smaller part of those people. So that's why doing it specifically on them being black because they were done wrong because they were black makes more sense.
Fuck, Mr. Girl, I've got a really good example. Shit. Can I just like?
Well, then I'll just go fuck myself. I'll just go fuck myself while you give your good example, I guess.
If this doesn't work on you, like I'll just give up and cry. Okay.
Nothing works on me.
Please. So like.
That's my trademark.
I'm just going to CRT pill you here. So like Crenshaw in the 90s wrote this essay with one of the ones on intersectionality. And one of the things that she noticed was that if you're looking at shelters for rape survivors, there was this problem that in black communities, for whatever reason, they kept on like underperforming. Like they didn't have enough resources, even though they were modeled according to like the finances of each community, and like what, you know, so if there's a working class community, they'd get more resources and all that. But the problem in specifically black working class communities was that the need for alternative housing for victims was so much higher because of generations of housing discrimination. So even though it was modeled to control for class, the problem was that black victims were still disenfranchised because even white working class victims were more likely to have support networks that they could get alternative housing quite easy. So the modeling for these shelters was that housing wasn't a massive priority, but in black communities, it had to be. And that's traced back to racism. So that's like one example of where like you can't disconnect race from like where race and class need to come
together. I would
like
to rebut. That is a after the fact understanding. After things were you tried to apply things equally, it didn't work out for the black people. You then looked at the data, and then after the fact, gave the black people the resources that they needed and did not have. You are now trying to say that this after the fact examination of what happened and then how you fixed it can be applied to a before the fact. We've not given reparations yet. Like mental gymnastics or rationalization of what you already want to do. But the reason you want to do it is not like, oh, if we give money to poor white people, it doesn't work, so we can only give it to the poor black people. That would be the analogy you'd have to make. You'd be like, well, we realize because of slavery, black people need infusions of cash into their bank accounts, or they need property given to their families that white people don't need. White people need something else. That's not what you're saying, so it's not really a good analogy. And I also think I'm already CRT pilled. I'm the only person here saying I don't think we can just say that slaves were enslaved because they're black. They're also enslaved because they're poor. There's no answer. Is it just because they're black or just because they're poor?
So I looked this up because I was curious about that as well. But there was
okay, motherfucker.
There was a heavy influence from racism, which contributed to the slave trade. I can read you this little blurb here. For much of the period from the 15th
I think we all know that it's more comfortable to take a whip to somebody who looks different from you. I don't think you're not going to get any argument about that.
I thought the argument was that slavery didn't start. They didn't enslave Europeans. Did not enslave African Americans because they were black, but because they were poor. That's what you said.
Okay, let's say you and me save up $50 million, and we're gonna enslave some people. We're gonna spend this money on enslaving people on an island. We buy the island, and then we have to pick a country to go to enslave people. And we're going to pick a country. We don't want to enslave people that look like us because that would be weird, right? So that's where our racism is going to come in. We're going to be more comfortable if they look different. What country do you want to go to enslave people? Should we go to Japan? Or should we go to the Congo?
I thought we were anti-white racist here.
Well, I don't know.
I was going to just bring up the actual history with when it came to the slave trade and the initiation.
I don't want to talk about the history. I want us to.
You don't want to talk about the history because you said something earlier that is now disproven based on the history. That's why you don't want to talk about it.
I'm proving to you right now that you cannot enslave people that are much richer than you.
So
you can't enslave
realize
rich
that if
people.
poverty may have played to the benefit of the racist, sure. However, they were not looking around saying, this is rich, this is poor, let's go get these guys because they're poor. It was because they were black that motivated the European slave trade largely.
It's obviously both. It's obviously
both.
But
it's more so on one than the other.
Okay, so you're saying that if black, so you're saying you could go to Wakanda and enslave Wakandans because they're black. You can't enslave rich people. That's what I'm trying to fucking tell you. They have to be. You can enslave white people if they're poor. You can't enslave rich black people. If they have a society that is technologically advanced like Wakanda and rich, you can't just go there and start loading up boats because they'll kill you. You can't do that. It doesn't make any sense.
Okay, so it sounds like what you're saying is that the poverty may have played to the benefit of the racist. No, however, you are translating what I'm saying. The slaves because of the distorted view that they had of African Americans. You realize that Europeans and Africans used to be in the trading business together, right? And it's during the 15th century that then led to the racist stereotypes that Europeans had of black people, which then also played a huge role in the transatlantic slave trade.
Like Lonerbox said, I am CRT pilled, and I understand the interactions between the profitability of being racist that encourages racism, then that racism encourages the profitability of slavery, and it's all an intertwined mess. And that's why I'm saying that it's not so simple. You can't just say these things happened to them just because they were black. It's also because they were poor.
You're saying it happened to them just because they were poor. You're being as reductionist. So you can't
just said it's both. Wait, do you remember when I was let's rewind.
Well, now you're kind of walking it back because this is why you don't want to bring up the historical fact because it disproves what you said a minute ago.
All right, Dick, will you help me out? Will you tell somebody to shut the fuck up? Please. Let's go to the chronology. Remember 5 minutes ago, Gambit, when I was mockingly saying it was both. Remember, does that ring a bell when I was saying that? So don't. Okay.
Nobody took contingent with that. Everybody took contingent when you previously said it was mostly because they were poor. You said that's why we should do reparations for poor people. You didn't say we should do reparations for poor.
No,
and
I'm
black
not
people.
saying that's why. Stop. I'm not saying that's why. Okay. I do not believe that the history of why people are poor should be taken into account when you're thinking about helping them. That's what I believe. So I don't think it matters whether you're poor or why you're poor or what color you are as you're poor or whether what color you are contributed to you being poor. I don't think that should be factored in. I can understand your justifications for it, but please do not take my counter argument outside the ball. Remember the ball. I'm making a counter argument outside the ball. I'm saying I don't think you should be using this shit because I don't think it makes any fucking sense. That my counter argument is I'm not saying we should give reparations to poor people if their ancestors are poor. I'm saying we should help out poor people because they're poor now, regardless of how they got there.
So, Mr. Girl, everybody agrees with you on federal policy that we shouldn't do it in a racial way. Nobody disagrees with that. But if you want to talk specifically about reparations in a distinct conversation versus just talking about UBI or free healthcare or whatever, yes. If you want to have a conversation over reparations, then yes, the idea of what demographic you belong to can matter. It can be very important due to why you ended up in a bad situation. If you want to just talk about, hey, I don't want to give free healthcare only to black people, nobody's going to disagree with you, but we're talking about reparations here. But you're trying to.
I don't want to give free healthcare only to descendants of slaves. My point is.
Nobody wants that. Nobody's arguing that. That's what I'm saying.
Okay. I think that when you have like discretionary prosecution, like the fact that cops can decide whether to investigate you and the prosecutor can decide whether to charge you and the judge can decide how long of a sentence to give you, all of these give opportunities for racism to creep into the system, right? Even if even if nobody's thinking it, it can still happen. Yes. I think a similar thing about this. When you start thinking, well, what's our reason for why this group of people gets help beyond that they need it. It is infused with anti-white racism.
Okay, I think we should do last words on this because somehow
Yeah.
Max turned a white grievance panel into a 1-hour debate on reparations. Unbelievable that he let that happen.
I think the white grievance standpoint is that reparations are not fair.
I'm grieving as a white man now.
Yeah.
I can't believe nobody mentioned Israel. Maybe I've been calling into the wrong shows for too long. Should we do?
Probably.
Can we move on to a happier question? Hopefully, this one's about pride. We know that Black pride is good, and Latinx. It says Latino pride here is good, but that's not as a Latinx.
I'm sorry to both of you.
Jesus.
Latinx pride is good. White pride is evil. What gives? Why is that?
Probably because of the association between white pride and what it has meant for so long. It is, especially colloquially, something very different than I am simply proud that I am the color that I am. Truthfully, I think it's pretty dumb to take pride in your race to begin with. Maybe you can be proud that you used to be discriminated against at one point in the country. You're not anymore. That's pretty based, I guess. But just saying like I am a proud Latinx or whatever the fuck, like that's pretty stupid also. But I think the reason the white pride thing is met with so much backlash is because, well, when do you see people saying white pride, right? It's always like the most extremist white nationalist types who preach the white pride the hardest.
Yeah.
The real
pride
talk
is usually a reply, right? Like gay pride is a thing because people are like, were told for most of their lives as children or whatever that they should be ashamed for being gay. So it's just like, yeah.
Right.
No.
I think along the lines of what Hunter said, I think when we look at the structure of white or the structure of Black, they were drawn specifically to create like oppressors and oppressees. But so I think when people see people take pride in the white moniker, they're seeing them take pride in drawing this circle around a certain group of people and preferentially treating them. And when you say white pride, you're saying that I'm proud of these boundaries that we've drawn to oppress other people. I don't really hear white people that are like not extremely racist even say this, because a lot of people don't even identify with whiteness because the term has become so like
yeah, I think the issue is that like white pride sounds dumb because really Black pride is kind of dumb. I don't think that there are groups of people that immigrate to the United States. Like I've had one person tell me this. Maybe it's not true, but I've heard people say that like if you come to the United States from Kenya or Nigeria, like, and you immigrate, like you don't think of yourself as like I'm a Black American. You think of yourself like, oh, like I'm from Kenya or I'm from Nigeria or whatever. Like it's a little bit more precise than that. Like if you go to Europe, people would from like Sweden or like the UK or Germany wouldn't necessarily be like, oh yeah, I'm white or whatever. Like they talk more along their ethnic lines. I think if people want to have pride because they're like Kenyan or because they're the descendants of slaves, African American, like these are fine. But like the idea of just like Black pride when there is no shared Black experience in the United States, I don't think so. Is kind of dumb, much the same that like there's not really a shared like arguably like a shared white experience in the United States. But like if people want to have like Irish pride or Scottish pride and you live in the US and you're talking about your descendants, that's probably okay. It sounds less weird, but
yeah.
You don't think there's a white identity to share? You don't think there's a white identity that people share in the United States?
I don't think so. I mean, there's not even really a coherent Black or brown identity. So the idea that there's a coherent white identity, I don't think is true. No way.
Yeah,
bad dancing, shopping at Target.
I think people use Black because like most people that are descendants of slaves have no clue. I don't know where the fuck I came from, so I'm not gonna have some pride in some other nationality.
Well, that's why I'm saying like it would be African American pride, right? Where African American is
like Fanatic found the term like ADOS, and that's why like a lot of us like, yo, that's a dope term. Okay, cool. So yeah, I agree that if there's more local classifications that we would accept those more. But I think people accept Black because that's majority of what's put on them in society. So it's like, yo, I'm Black and I overcame. So it's like a symbol of pride in that way.
Sure.
MrGirl, do you have anything to say about pride?
I think
seems like everyone is post pride here. They think that even the
well, it sounds like it, but I don't. That's not the sense I get looking around the country and looking at conservatives, especially. I think Trump has certainly tapped into a strong feeling of not just anti-white shame or people who don't want to be ashamed of being white, but people who are proud to be white. It does feel like a white identity, whether it's coherent. Like, I don't know if like Christianity or Judaism are really coherent identities either, but people have them. So I disagree. I think that there is a white identity, and I don't think that everybody who has it is racist, Gambit. And I disagree with everything everybody just said, I think.
I think actually maybe we could agree if we frame it how I think Gambit might have been the one that brought up the point. Why do people have pride? And it might be in response to other types of aggression. So if you are seeing people now that are like proud to be white, maybe it's because they've only felt attacked as white people, right? Like absent like the insane progressive attacks,
like gay people
on white people. Yeah, when you have a bunch of people saying "fuck white people," well, then it's not really that surprising that those white people that feel all attacked are going to like gather together and like have some kind of coherent movement or something.
I think you're also saying they shouldn't have it because it's nonsensical or doesn't make sense. Those are the same, but because you're saying it's nonsensical, that it's dumb. They shouldn't have it because it's dumb, but they do. I mean, like I guess the question is not so much should white people be proud of themselves, but what if they are? What are they supposed to do about that? And are they allowed to talk about it? And how do we talk about them?
I think it's okay.
Right now, the answer feels like they're not allowed to talk about it, and we talk about them very negatively.
I think it's okay, but I think what Hunter said is important. Anybody saying that they're white and proud should understand the context that could be perceived in. And as long as they're elucidating that I'm not a KKK member that's proud of oppression and things like that, I see no problem with people being white and proud.
Do you think black people should have to say I'm not a gangster every time they say they're proud of being black because of what the other side associates with their race? I don't think that's fair. I don't think it's fair to tell people they should have to make some fucking... I don't think it's fair to tell people... Every group of people does horrible shit for all of eternity. So, okay, everybody is associated with a group of people that does horrible things. And to say that, motherfucker, no, to say that any time that you're going to say you're proud of your race or that you should have to fucking cut your balls off to appease the liberals, no.
Wait, can I ask you a question? I don't want to remove context, man. You like that. So when you hear black pride, do you think of gangster, blah, blah, blah? I don't think you do. I don't think the colloquial context of using black pride.
I don't, but I think when conservatives hear black pride, they think BLM. They think riots.
No.
Something actually that Gambit does agree with, I don't know if he'll admit it now, but this was kind of a funny way that this showed up in a past argument, was I agree that you should probably be aware of the context when you say shit like, oh, I've got white pride or whatever. But something that I thought was really weird is there's a lot of like those like Nation of Islam people are pretty fucked up. And when I hear people talk about like black separatism or like black supremacy,
that's cringe.
Is it? Yeah. I thought. Wait, was it? You didn't defend that before?
Dude. No.
Are you sure you didn't say?
No, I think those
it looked like
I feel like I was on a panel. No. I feel like I was on a panel with you, and I feel like you were defending. You were trying to say like, oh, well, black separatism is different than white separatism.
I could have sworn it was you.
Let me clear this up because I don't know who's gonna watch this. What you're talking about is the panel that me, you, Fanatic Prime, and everybody was on, and the topic came up on can people date preferentially inside of their race. And I had no problem with white, black, Asian, whatever people. I don't think it's racist to date only inside your race. And there are people that do that, and I think it's cringe, but I don't think that's racist. That's the argument that we had. It wasn't anything about black separatism.
It was it might not have been you. It might have been another person.
Not even close.
No. It must have been another person. I don't remember who it was.
So
somebody was.
Like a racial argument we've been in. Well, outside of you saying that, like the criminal justice system is a racist, which you walked back, which was great. But yeah, those are the only two arguments that we've had about black stuff.
Okay.
Well, kind
Hunter,
of like
what were you saying about? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say real quick that I actually am not. I kind of find it pretty annoying if you have to like issue a trigger warning before you say like, just so everybody knows, I am not in fact part of the KKK, but I do take pride in the fact that I am white. Like, I think that's pretty fucking cringe. But again, the reason that people even suggest something like that is because white pride has specifically been co-opted to mean something different from the actual semantics of white and pride. So would you ask a black person if they have to be if they're not a gangster before saying black pride? Like, black pride has not been co-opted to the same extent. I don't think a trigger warning is a good idea, but I think that there are reasons why people take issue with white pride more than pride in other types of races.
To be clear, and maybe I misspoke, and if I did, I want to take that back. I didn't say people need to lay out all of these things when they say white pride. I said specifically they should understand the context. So I wasn't necessarily saying that, hey, you got to announce all of these other like ad libs to it. I just think you should be aware of that context and how you could be perceived. And I think if you do a devoid of context, there are going to be people that perceive you as a KKK member, and you should be aware of that.
But it's an evasive stance to take. We're not talking about whether that's going to happen. Obviously, it's going to happen because people hate white people. The question is, should it happen?
I think the question, I think a really good question to ask is like, where does each one is like, why did people come up with Black Pride versus White Pride? And like, the reason Black Pride became a thing, I guess, is because when you were black and you were moved over to America, is like, but by 1 or 2 generations, you had no fucking idea where you were from. You were just Black American. That's why the Black Pride makes sense as a kind of like African American. That's why that's the umbrella. Whereas if you're white, you know, like you know your heritage, you know whether your identity is connected to something like nationality or ethnicity. So it's weird that you would choose the white part instead, because that's obviously like a lot more, it has a lot more baggage.
I know, but so this is the vice that white people are put in now. Because of your baggage, you can't fight back against anti-white sentiment. You can't talk about it. You can't have pride. You can't say that you love being white or love white people or that you want to date other white people. You can't do any of the tools that you just named that black people have used to kind of cope with their position in society. White people don't have. Their hands are tied behind their back, and now it's just like free shots on white people. And it's like, is there a point where this is going to stop? Like the standing of white people is dropping. And that's ideal, right? We want white people to be equal to everybody else, or at least we want other people to raise. But the relative standing is dropping, and yet they're not allowed to have any of the tools that other minorities use to cope.
I don't think you believe anything that you're saying right now, because we've talked on the panel very close to this. So you understand that there's pattern recognition, and you understand that if there's a large portion of
Are you calling me a liar, motherfucker?
No. I'm saying that I think right now
you're calling me stupid. Okay. Go ahead.
No, I'm not calling you stupid. No, but you understand that if there's a group of people that say one thing and it starts to be the prevailing context nationally of what that phrase that they're saying means, you understand that you can't just walk into the room and use that phrase and expect people not to associate you with the group that says that.
Again, you're conflating a prescriptive argument and a descriptive argument. I understand that that's what will happen. That's why I had the fucking panel, because I think it's a problem that that's happening. So I want to get together with a bunch of people who agree that this is happening and talk about what should happen. So I'm saying the vice, yes, that's what I just described. White people are being squeezed in this vice where it's not okay to be white. You're going to be hated and slowly turned into a minority, but you're not allowed to have any of the things that other minorities have.
What's it going to take before white people can say they have white pride? Because it seems like, from what everyone's saying, the concept of black people don't know where they're from. They're from a bunch of different places, so they say they have black pride. That applies to white people too. So what's it going to take for white people to be able to say they have white pride?
I think we should just let them have it now.
Yeah, you can say it, right? Yeah, you can.
We can
say it. I'm just. Yeah, you just might be misconstrued.
No, wait.
Like they can't.
Like even if you're okay with it, like, but the rest of the world isn't, right? Like, obviously, it's a problem. Yeah.
All right, all of us tweet out. I am proud of my white heritage.
I'm good on that one, Chief.
My
three. Account's made it pretty far. I don't want to lose him right now. Okay.
I'll tweet it out too.
I can do it.
Thank you.
I'm proud of the fact that I'm white.
Wait, you can't type that, Max. You don't count as white, no?
I said my hair. I have white heritage. We all got a little.
Oh shit!
At least.
All the Nazis argue with Tommy.
You
Jewish guys don't get to be white. You don't count as the same thing. But
listen, maybe after the alt-right or the Groypers or whatever stop ruining white pride for all the non-racist proud white people, then we can maybe talk. But unfortunately, they've kind of poisoned that phrase a little bit. I think a really good thing that you could bring up actually is as like acknowledging that political leaders, especially who ride on the back of white grievance, never really do anything about it. Like, what did Trump do? He gave tax breaks to billionaires and put his fucking family all in the White House. Bolsonaro filled his administration with big business leaders and fucking ripped through the Amazon and got rid of gay-sex marriage and gay marriage. And then Boris Johnson had the shittest lockdown response like a shitload of people died, and then he basically just like lied to the public for years until he was eventually kicked out by his own party. So yeah, well, I don't know what the distress like what white people are looking for, but it's not that.
All right,
I think that right now, like, this is kind of
Max.
going back to why MrGirl was mad at me from the beginning is the talk of systemic issues and whatnot, is that it seems like a lot of the anti-white sentiment exists more so in social circles or social environments. Aside from Twitter, I will grant that Twitter can be considered a system, sure. But generally speaking, it's not like there's this policy that is causing this. So I think that a lot of the times when talking about like, how do you even change the attitude, it can be really complicated, because how do you? How do you stop people from thinking that they're somehow more virtuous by being a white person tweeting how much white people suck?
Well,
how do you even change that?
Reparations, I think, could be
To white people?
I could get behind that.
Reparations for white people. No, I was going to say that I think reparations for black people will be perceived by white people and by me as a systemic anti-white policy.
Cool.
Relatively. It's also a pro-black policy. I'm not saying it's only that. I'm just saying that there is a lens through which you can look where it's like helping one person, not helping another. The problem with getting your housing loan denied if you're black is if they give it to a white person. So it's all relative.
Yeah, if you want to take white pride, just go use it in positive ways. We'll form a more positive association to it, and then you won't be stereotyped. If you want the answer, that's the answer, right?
Yeah, I think so.
It seems like there's an unending parade of people who use it negatively to always stoke the fire, though, so white people could never use it.
Yeah, you'll have to just separate
white people, the
yourself from
architects of our own demise once more.
them. Yeah,
That is why I just tweeted out, I am proud of my white heritage, and I know that you guys are all doing the same.
I
And we're
retweeted
gonna oh good.
Well, if white
That
people are
counts.
causing other white people's demise, I think I need to go tweet white people suck.
No, that's the problem. We don't want to make it worse.
Related to that, by the way, Loner, you should ask some white people what they think about Trump's Supreme Court picks if you don't think that they think he did anything for them. Here's the question. Does the concept of white privilege foster and encourage resentment for white people? And if so, is it worth it? The concept of white...
I think white privilege is a really good thing to understand in the classroom, but I think it almost exclusively has to stay there. Like, it is just so toxic and damaging to public discourse that people either intentionally or unintentionally just can't understand. There's just no point to ever use the phrase. It just fucks everything up.
I kind of
Why do you
agree
think
with
it's-
Destiny there, partially. Because the
What do you guys
concept, like,
mean?
white people do have privilege for sure, and a lot of privilege that is afforded to white people is literally on the basis of the fact that they are white. Maybe it's my majority privilege as well, but I also agree that it's kind of like the phrase toxic masculinity. Like, anytime you hear it, it's just someone being like, shut up, you have white privilege, you can't talk about this, and it's not really helping anything.
What do you guys think it does in the classroom where it's a good thing? Who do you think it helps?
I mean, it's good to understand that like certain classes of people can be disadvantaged for a lot of reasons, right? There could be like attractiveness privilege, there could be height privilege, there could be ethnic privileges, there could be, a neighborhood where you live, depending on, like, there's a lot of things that I think it's good to understand that when we're looking at like wide groups of people to figure out like why some people do okay and some people don't do okay. It's probably good to have those conversations. But when you weaponize all these statements, like really bad things happen.
Right. And I think that, like, it's also interesting to think about it because there can exist a white privilege on more of a statistical level, but a lot of the times that is misapplied to just an individual person. Like, if you're working a 9-to-5 and you're barely getting by on minimum wage, and then some like lefty comes up and tells you that you have white privilege, then odds are you're going to take extreme offense to that because you're thinking, what the hell did I get that I haven't earned? Right. And it just harms discourse. It really is kind of a useless term at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think it's even possible to keep in the classroom, to have it out, something that's so easy to weaponize that you could teach it at all and have it stay
I think
there?
if you're going to use it, you have to understand that first of all, that it doesn't really tell you that much about any specific individual, and also just that actually sometimes right wingers kind of accidentally do this, where they kind of they basically just make the intersectional argument, as they'll say, well, you're calling me white privileged, well, I'm poor and I'm 4 feet tall and I've only got one arm. How am I privileged? Well, that's an intersectional approach to privilege. I think if you're going to understand one kind of privilege, you'd probably understand all of them.
Yeah.
I think just because we're bastardizing terms doesn't make the term in itself useless. I think it makes the people that are making those arguments useless. I think white privilege has a definition, and when we, like y'all was saying, when we misapply it and use it for in personal conversation, it doesn't make sense. That's not what it's meant to represent. It's meant to be like a systemic or a cultural thing, and when people apply it to individuals, especially individuals working a 9 to 5 with one arm, it doesn't make sense, right? So y'all are really upset with the abuse of the term, not really the term itself.
Yeah,
I'm upset with the term itself.
This could apply though to the white pride thing too, right? Like white pride, just the fact that it's been bastardized, we might argue, doesn't then mean that it can't be used in some other different context. Whereas with white pride or white privilege, we can think of a better way to phrase it, then maybe that'd be better.
Yeah, I think the term is flawed, because when you say I have white privilege, you just mean I get treated like I should be. I get treated normal. I get I apply for a job
means white, right? That's the issue.
Well, I know, but you're saying I apply for a job and I get the job. If my application is successful, that's normal. That's what you would expect. To call that a privilege doesn't really make sense. I think it sets the bar for normality at like being treated like a black person is normal. And then white people are have got special privilege, but that's not really true. I think being treated like a black person is abnormal in most situations. It's below the bar.
Yeah, wherever you want to put the barometer is fine.
I know, but I'm saying that the word privilege puts the barometer at a person of color has the normal expected experience. White people get all these special privileges. We should take that away. We should treat white people the way we treat everybody else, which is like shit. That doesn't make any sense. That it would make sense to. Shouldn't you want to frame it that we should treat people of color the way we treat white people? Shouldn't everybody get treated? And again, I'm speaking not on Twitter and in my circles, but in the justice system. Shouldn't everybody get treated the way white people get treated?
Everybody should have white privilege.
Yeah.
Right. So the word privilege doesn't really make sense. The word privilege makes you want to take the special treatment away from white people. It's geared to make you want to pull white people down.
Wow.
I can agree with that with the phrasing, but maybe I would be more than happy to be corrected here. But isn't it true that if there are people in the country right now who are treated poorly or are not as fortunate as white people on the basis of the fact that they're not white, wouldn't that then almost demand that white people do have a privilege solely because someone else is misfortuned for not being white? Or am I wrong there?
If you and I go to a restaurant and they're like, Hunter, you're not allowed to use the bathroom. And then I go to the bathroom, do I have a special privilege? Like, it's not the VIP room, it's just normal. You're supposed to be able to go to the bathroom at a restaurant. But I feel like there's something bad's being done to you more than something good's being done to me.
Right. So rather than a privilege, it's more of inequality directed at me there.
Yeah, right. Because it's like, because you're not like, well, fuck, if I can't go to the bathroom, Max shouldn't be able to either. And I feel like it engenders that sentiment of like, well, fuck these white people in their nice houses, driving their cars and having their jobs and shit. Fuck them. We should all fucking live in the inner city. Like that, but doesn't make any sense.
I agree with that. Yeah. I think that you're right, that it can easily be misapplied there too.
That's right. I agree. I don't know.
So
I agree. Yes.
Nice.
Get rid of the term then. We got
get rid of the term.
MrGirl wins.
MrGirl wins.
If you are getting rid of it, you've got to get rid of all the other ones, right? Like good-looking privilege or like tall privilege or whatever, right? Or
but that's not normal.
I think
there's like all my privileges are going out the fucking window now. Great.
No, because a really good-looking tall person gets extra shit. They get a job that they don't deserve. They get a tip that's more than 20%. So that's not. We shouldn't all be treated like that. We should.
I don't know, but if a black and white person are applying for a job, and the employer says picks the white person, but only because they've got some like internal like racial bias, and the white person taking the job they didn't deserve, right?
Exactly.
No, I don't think that's how it works.
Why not?
What?
Someone else is being disqualified on the basis of their race, right?
Yeah, I would frame it that way, not that the white person, like, yes, I don't, because like a lot of white people are applying for the job.
But it's a privilege that you get to kind of like leapfrog over other people who would otherwise be more competitive.
No, you're not
right?
leapfrogging. They're just being sunk.
Okay.
You can say this with any privilege, right? You're just saying, I want to look at the glass half full. That's what you're arguing.
No, I'm not.
He's saying
I'm
that, like,
saying
imagine you
something.
look at a person with 2 legs, and we call those people advantaged people. He'd be saying, well, hold on. We shouldn't call people with 2 legs advantaged, because that's assuming that, like, having less than 2 legs is normal. We should be calling the people with 1 leg disadvantaged.
But if you put a 2-leg person if you put a 2-legged person in the one-leg, sorry, if you put a 2-legged person in the 1-legged person games, then I guess they do have the advantage.
True.
Yes, you can engineer a situation to make what we're saying not make sense. But if you don't do that, it's about where you're setting the barometer for normal. So it's not, you can't just take all kinds of privilege and lump them together. That's the problem. I'm saying white privilege is a misnomer. You're not actually saying that white people get special benefits for being white. You're saying they just get treated the way that people should be treated. That's all it means. What you're really saying is that people who aren't white don't get treated well.
Pretty people just get treated the way that they should be treated.
No, they get treated better.
It's really ugly disadvantage.
No, they get treated better than they should.
No, it's an ugly disadvantage. It's a short disadvantage.
I don't think that's true.
No, it is though.
Well, it's a pretty well-known fact, I believe, that like fat people are less likely to get a job as compared to a good-looking thin person. Does that mean that fat people are mistreated, or does that mean that thin people have a privilege?
It means fat people are mistreated, but at a certain point, if you're super pretty, when we talk about pretty privilege, we're talking about people who are much
like me.
more, people like Steven, who are much more attractive than the average person, who get,
all sorts of opportunities that you couldn't imagine.
Money and fame that the rest of us could only dream of.
Does it matter if everyone is fat? Which is normal?
Yeah, I think that moves the barometer. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. It seems so. You're saying it's a term that's crafted specifically to weaponize against white people to play at their guilt. It sounds like. Is that sort of what you're saying?
Yeah, and to rationalize anti-white sentiment.
It can be used to rationalize anti-white sentiment, but I don't like the idea. Hold on, wait. I don't like the phrasing of it's been crafted in order to encapsulate white guilt or something. No, I think that white privilege most likely originated as nothing but an academic term, and it has now been abused by a bunch of loser LARPers.
But it's academically stupid, so I am willing to call it crafted.
Well, I mean, we're into semantics here, and I think that your approach is probably better rhetorically, but I do think there's still something to be said that if there is a society in which everybody or black people are treated worse because of their race and white people are not treated worse, then you could also argue that you have a form of white privilege.
You can, but like, how are I just don't believe that the millions of people who are poring over this term academically, writing and reading books.
This is the dumbest semantics argument ever. Okay, you can use these terms in any ways, right? Like, if you are a healthy male, or
but it matters.
It doesn't. If you're a healthy person in society,
it does.
That's an amazing advantage. That's really good. You have your health. Everybody would speak that way. You're so privileged. You have your health, even though being healthy should be the default position. Like, when we're talking about privileges and advantages, we're usually speaking relative to other people, right? If there are people that are disadvantaged for certain things, if you have your health, that's considered a great advantage. You wouldn't say like, "Wow, you've got your health." You're considered a great normal. That's not what it means. It'd be like an advantage.
But no, when you say you're privileged to have your health, you're making a comparative state. You're trying to reframe how we all normally think. We all think being healthy is normal, and you're saying actually you should be grateful for your health.
No, that I don't agree.
Well, you should.
Like, if you have a test the next day and you get a full night's worth of sleep, and somebody's like, "What an awesome advantage! Like, good job! Like, that's great! Like, you have the privilege of being wide awake today when you take your test." You wouldn't be like, "That's not a privilege." And when you frame it that way, you're doing a disservice to the people that didn't.
No, I wouldn't. No, but the person is obviously saying it to provide an alternate lens for you to look through. They're saying, like, whatever else is going on in your life, think about your health, your sleep, you have space, you have shit that other people don't have, and like maybe you should feel differently about your life than you do. That's the only reason to say something like that out loud. Okay. So the question is, if white privilege is adopted as not just a certain way of looking at things, but like how things are, what does that do to white people? And you're saying it doesn't matter, but I think it does matter.
We agree that you have amazing rhetorical argument.
Or I mean, like, well, let's look at how we want things to be in society. If you were to ask most people, what's our goal for society? Do we want in a society with white privilege? Do we want everybody to be treated like white people, or do we want everybody to be treated like black people?
Probably
when
better
BLM,
than white people,
when
but
BLM
closer
are
to
looking
white
at like
people.
crime stats, are they saying like the amount of people they get, the amount of black people that get mistreated by the cops is bullshit? We need to get more white people mistreated so that it's fair. Or are they doing the other argument? They're saying like, okay, well, hold on, white people get treated this way, black people get treated this way. We should all be treated like white people, even though they're saying white people have an advantage.
No.
They want everybody to enjoy the same
No,
advantages, right?
No, black people clearly want it both ways. When Derek Chauvin gets his sentence, or whenever any cop gets off, or anybody, or a school shooter that comes out, when a mass shooter comes out alive and the police arrest him, black people are sitting there like they should have fucking shot that guy 35 times in the fucking back.
No, they're not.
Oh my God, the tears I have seen, literal people weeping on social media about how this guy didn't go to jail for the rest of his life. Why can't we just have some justice? It would just make me feel so much better if he would just hang a few white people. Just hang some white people. It's just, oh, I'm so sad. I need my justice. It happens all the fucking time. Don't.
Can I ask you a question? Should Derek Chauvin have went to prison?
Did Derek Chauvin ever go to prison? I think
should he have to prison.
Oh, should he have gone to prison?
Yeah.
I'm pretty anti-jail, so I don't.
In the society that we have
in the current system,
now,
come on.
In the current system that we have, if you commit murder, do you think separating those people away from the population of what we have jail right now, which is our only solution, do you think that it's just to ask for that justice?
It's the only solution we have now.
People asking for what's normal. We want.
Yes, I know, but wait, stop. The whole point, my whole problem is that we're assuming that what's normal is this horrible fucking thing that I think is just torturing people.
Well, it's not horrible. Being white is awesome.
I don't think Derek Chauvin should be tortured for what he did, and I think jail is torture. So no, I don't think he should have gone to jail. But I don't think a black person who did the exact same thing should go to jail either. But my problem is that in response to torture,
what do you think there should have been justice served in some way or another?
I don't think revenge is. I don't think revenge is justice, and I think.
Do you think he was guilty of a crime?
Motherfucker, let me answer one of these questions. You want to dogpile me? Bring it on.
It sounds
Bring it
like
on,
weaseling, to be honest.
Someone put their knee on MrGirl's neck.
Bring it on. Hop on. There's enough room on this dick for all of you.
Jesus.
Okay, to answer your questions one at a time. I don't think that jail is justice. I think jail is torture and revenge. We live in a bloodthirsty society that for some reason has the highest incarceration rate of anywhere in the world. And it's because we're bloodthirsty fucks and we like locking people up and torturing them because we hate them. Two, I know I don't, but just because we've normalized chaining up black people and torturing them doesn't make me want to do it to white people. But my whole point was with white privilege, when you frame it like that, it encourages this kind of sentiment where black people are like, justice would be if you were tortured too. It would just be so wonderful if that would happen to you. I would cry tears of righteousness.
I didn't know you were the ultra leftist we were talking about earlier. You believe in getting rid of prison? Jesus Christ, what happened?
I believe most people should not go to prison, and then if they do go to prison, it should be to remove them from society, not to torture them.
What would justice look like to you for someone who does commit like the crime that Chauvin did? Like, what would it look like to you?
Chauvin shouldn't be a cop. I don't. Does any of us think that if Derek Chauvin, does any of us think that if Derek Chauvin was not a police officer, that he would have knelt on anybody's neck for 9 minutes?
Who knows?
In broad daylight. Okay.
In broad daylight, no, but maybe in trying to restrain somebody else as a bouncer or maybe at a party or something, maybe he would have.
Okay. Do you think Derek Chauvin should be a bouncer? I don't think so. He's pretty clearly has shown that he is not able to like really read the room and like not kill people.
To castrate him, that's violence. Why would you do such a thing? You're gonna disembowel him from every job that he could possibly.
Yeah. What is he
get?
just not allowed to do any physically contacted job?
Damn.
Can you work like loss prevention at like Super Target or is that like?
Yeah, I think so. I think justice. My view of justice is to prevent it from happening again. In my view, what would prevent it from happening again is no security guard, no cop, no jobs where you're restraining people or where a part of your duty would be to restrain people. You clearly have shown that you're not able to do that. When I watched the video of Derek Chauvin killing George Floyd, I'm not thinking like that he's a racist or that he's like that there's animosity there. I just think he doesn't know what to do and just did the wrong thing. And I think he felt probably cornered and just kept doubling down on what he was already doing because he didn't want to suffer the humiliation of admitting he was wrong in front of a bunch of people. And he probably didn't think that would result in the guy dying, and then it did. somebody with that kind of like train of thought should not be a cop.
Yeah, you're saying gross negligence. You can make that. If that wants to be your argument, that's cool. But the question is, in your society, people that commit gross negligence, that murder people, what are you like? Are you going to say, "Oh yeah, we're just going to find you a new job"?
Yeah,
like there'd have to be some. You don't think there should be any kind of a punishment, even if it is like your negligence could harm other people, so we should lock you up for a certain amount of time to keep.
I don't think you should go to
safe?
jail for being stupid. No, I don't think that's right. I don't think you should be punished for being stupid. And I think Derek Chauvin ultimately is just, or was in that situation, stupid or even maybe impaired in some way, where he did like, clearly there's no fucking way he was like, I'm going to murder this guy in broad daylight with the entire planet watching me.
Well, yeah, of course, but I mean, the fact that
so he didn't kill him on purpose.
He doesn't have to do it on purpose. It's the fact that he had negligence and then was also a cop, which means he had a higher degree of responsibility.
So to me, that speaks to a systemic problem where clearly it might not even be a systemic problem. It might not even be a systemic problem because this doesn't happen that often. Maybe it's just that it looks like it happens a lot because whenever it happens, everybody talks about it on social media. So it seems like a big statistical issue when maybe it's just like, well, this shit just happens sometimes. When we have a group of people who run around, their job is to lock you up and contort your body into different positions. So once in a while, it's going to kill you.
But it is definitely indicative of a systemic problem. Not that there's a.
I don't know. I don't know if it actually is. I don't know.
Well, I know that it is. I know that it is because we have statistics which show that Black people are more likely to and do get killed by cops at disproportionate rates. This doesn't mean that all of them are dying the same way that Derek or that George Floyd did.
I don't think that's actually true.
I think that if we wipe our minds from all of the if we wipe our minds from all the media we've seen, from all of the lines we've been fed, from all the ideologies we have, and I think we watch the videos and we look at everything that happened with George Floyd and Derek Chauvin, I think any honest actor would obviously say Chauvin was not trying to kill George Floyd. That almost certainly wasn't happening. If you look at his facial expressions, you look at everything that's going on, seems like he was probably trying to restrain him. He wasn't taking him seriously when he said he couldn't couldn't breathe, because Floyd literally said that like 15 times during the encounter when he was in the backseat and clearly couldn't breathe.
He wasn't taking him seriously when he didn't have a pulse either. Like,
sure, hold on. Wait, hold on.
He's just trying to.
Yeah, he's obviously he's
Somebody
doubling.
checked this pulse and he stayed on him. Like, what are you talking about?
He's doubling down because he's okay. Never mind.
I agree.
You have to appeal to a reasonable person. You think a reasonable person would continue restraining someone without a pulse?
Yeah, I think that he wasn't a reasonable person at the point where there are 50 people around him with cameras screaming at him, where he's got a guy on the ground and like everything is fucked. I don't think he's acting reasonably at that point in time. But in your world, hold on. The flip side is, in your world, do you think that he's like trying to make sure that he's dead? No, of course not.
I don't need to rationalize it. I just call it gross negligence.
Sure, yeah, that's great. I think hopefully even MrGirl would agree. Gross negligence, absolutely.
No, absolutely.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Easily.
Yeah, but I don't think we should put people in jail for gross negligence. In Hunter, I don't believe that the police kill Black people disproportionately.
Uh-oh.
Okay, well, I'll go ahead and pull up some stats and then
pull them up.
Talk about how you're wrong.
Well,
I thought we were talking about like white grievances. We went into.
We would say though. Well, never mind. That's a whole other.
Okay, so anyway, what I was saying is that the white privilege thing comes into play, the way it affects people with the criminal justice system, where you are more like yes, people will weep for the Black person who is overly policed and overly sentenced and overly shot, but they also weep when they see a white person not get shot when they shouldn't be shot. So a white person who commits a mass shooting, drops their gun and comes out with their hands up, should not be murdered, but you will see tons of progressives, many of them Black, complaining about the fact that they were not murdered by the police. And that is sick. That is weird. That is bad. And I think that the use of the term white privilege definitely encourages this sentiment of like, well, if it's going to happen to me, it should fucking happen to you too.
So I want to build a bridge with you. Yes, I agree with you that those people exist. I think a bigger majority of Black people look at that situation and says, I wish I had my day in court instead of being killed. I think that's the most common sentiment. So are there like situations where that
I'm not trying to say that it's like, yes, I think we're both speaking in generalizations. So I'm not saying that that's every black person or every leftist or whatever. I'm just saying that the sentiment is there.
I agree. Yeah. I think,
and it is fueled by people who spread misinformation, like Hunter here, who go around saying that black people are disproportionately shot by the police.
Okay,
in
so
huge
let's
numbers.
See. Wait, stop.
This is
right
not
off the
true.
bat. No, right off the bat, you just lied about me. I never said in massive numbers. I said they are disproportionately more likely to get killed by the police. That is exactly what I said, and that is exactly what I found right here. From these growing data sets come some disturbing findings. This is from nature.com, by the way. About 1,000 civilians are killed each year by law enforcement officers in the United States. By one estimate, black men are 2.5 times more likely than white men to be killed by police during their lifetime. And in another study, people...
That's true. Wait, but that doesn't mean it's disproportionate, though.
Seem to be twice as likely as white people to be unarmed.
Yes.
This is disproportionate.
He's gonna
They're more likely.
Hold on, wait, real quick. Just on this too.
Than white people.
Wait,
that is disproportionate.
Just real quick. That twice likely to be unarmed or whatever. Keep in mind that my understanding is that these numbers are very low. It's like 19 black people versus like 9 white people. We're not talking like huge numbers. If you could find those, it'd be great. But isn't it something like 20 black unarmed people are killed a year by cops? It's not like in the hundreds of thousands.
I never said it was huge numbers.
Sure, I know, but I'm just saying that when we say that like there's like a 30% chance higher.
Wait,
no, I'm not done yet.
I want to respond to your bogus statistics.
Well, I'm not done yet because I have another quote unquote bogus statistic to read you.
Well, you're gish galloping. Dick, will you?
Guys can go back and forth.
I'm responding to.
Let me go back and forth. I want to add context. Just like if you were saying that black people commit more crimes, I would say, well, hold on, I want to add some context to this because that's not fair.
You got to keep it short so he can do his other stat, though.
Okay, black people commit way more violent crimes than white people.
True.
So when you and it's not because they're black, it's not a genetic thing, but it does happen. And that there's of course
ad-libs? You should do that with white power too. You added ad-libs because you were uncomfortable with what usually is said in that time. I'm just showing you how you do exactly everything we were talking about earlier. No, go ahead. Then.
I'm trying to cut off the road that he would have to say that. So I'm preempting. Given that black people commit so many more violent crimes than white people, you would expect them to be policed more and shot more by the police. And also, there's tons of shit you can do, even while unarmed, to get the police to shoot you. And they are, by their own rules, they are justified in shooting you for doing so. So that's not 2.5 times more likely to be like innocently sitting there and shot for no reason. There's plenty of shit you can do to get shot by the police when you're unarmed. And I believe that black people in America today are more likely statistically to do those things. So the idea that police are just shooting people because they're black rather than shooting people because of corollary factors that are present and because they are black is, I think, not true.
This goes back to the entire systemic problem, which is what started this whole conversation to begin with. You're right. There is higher rates of crime amongst black communities. Why is that? Because there are higher rates of poverty amongst black communities. Why is that? Because of redlining, which was a racist policy that negatively impacted black people disproportionately.
But I think when you say...
Wait. You have higher rates of police brutality against black people and even possibly unarmed black people. That's why that one part of the study was relevant. And the reason for that is due to systemic racism. So what you had said originally, you said that I claimed there was a massive amount of black people getting shot. I never said anything like that. I simply said that black people were more likely to disproportionately face violence from police. And that is true, even if you try to explain it via crime rates. The reason the crime rates are the way they are is also because of systemic inequalities.
Well, no, I agree with that. But when you say disproportionately shot by police, I thought the implication was that the decision to shoot is imbued with racial prejudice, when I think that's not often the case.
Well, there are some studies that show that where they've had,
which is based off racial prejudice.
Well, yeah, I mean,
sure.
it's
a question.
Mr. Girl is right when he adds the fact that there are higher crime rates in those communities. Yes, but there have also been studies where they'll take police officers and put them in a algorithm, or not an algorithm, but
Simulated.
in a virtual setting, and they are found to be way more trigger happy when it comes to black suspects.
Yes.
Wait, hold on. I could be so wrong on this. I thought it was actually the opposite with those implicit bias tests. I thought that when they tested it, police officers were more reluctant to shoot at black people than white people in those tests. I'm almost positive I remember seeing
there may have been more than one. I know that the one.
I mean, it probably depends on whether it was done in 2020 or before.
I think there were two different factors. One was how fast they would shoot, and one was they would shoot more. And I think there was a difference in those two statistics, and that's where our disagreement could be coming from. I think there were two different things that they were measuring.
Do you have statistics on which of those shootings and how many were found to be justified after the fact? Because I think that would the overall statement of is there systemic racism or racism at all in shootings, that would probably be a part of it.
I can scroll through it. I didn't even read the second stat yet, which showed that it is still the highest. Risk is highest for black men who face about a 1 in 1,000 chance of being killed by police over the life course. The average lifetime odds being killed by police are about 1 in 2,000 for men and about 1 in 33,000 for women. Risk peaks between the age of 20 and 35 years old. For young men of color, police use of force is among the leading causes of death.
Yeah, but this is like the interesting part that Mr. Girl brought up is let's say that we have 10 people, okay? 5 white people, 5 black people. Let's say that we give 5 black people drugs and we send them outside, and the white people have no drugs and we send them outside. Let's say that the cops arrest all 5 black people. When we look at that, when we analyze that situation, do we say the police officers are arresting a disproportionate amount of black people? Even though it's true, and even though those black people are getting arrested due to, in a way, systemic racism, giving them the drugs, at the time when the policing is happening, is that a systemic inequality, or is that what we would naturally expect? Would it not be the case that if they weren't arresting them at the rates they were, there would actually be a problem there because they are committing more crime due to systemic injustices, but to ignore the arrest rates or to ignore the crime happening at that point would actually be a bad thing? That's like the question. I don't know how the numbers play out on that, but that's the question that Mr. Girl is raising.
I also think you're making a strong implication because we're talking about George Floyd and Derek Chauvin. So in the context of that, it doesn't sound like you're just talking about the systemic issues that put them both in the position that they were in. It sounds like you're saying, what do we do with cops who kill black people who are not posing a threat? And then if you say right after that, you go into cops or shoot black people in disproportionate numbers, it feels like you're saying that they shoot them disproportionately to encounters with black people, not that they encounter them disproportionately, but shoot them at the same rates that they shoot white people.
I believe right, but I thought that it was higher rates or higher likelihood of them shooting black people than white people. That's where the disproportionate factor.
I think per encounter, I don't think that's true.
From my memory, it's been a long time. I can't remember the study, but I think wasn't it that it was like for shooting, they were actually a fraction of a second more likely to shoot white suspects, but for every other form of violence, they were more likely to go for black people. Was that not?
Was that by that Harvard professor guy Fryer?
Yeah.
Yeah, that study was actually debunked.
I have a question for the panel. Does it matter that we're missing the definitions of how black people are shot? Like, is this relevant to that we can't even determine on what exactly is systemic racism?
I think so. Well, I think what I wanted to say is that the messaging. Okay, all of us are way more conservative in our stances than the average progressive. Like if you take a bunch of super progressive, especially streamers, they wouldn't make it this far in the conversation. Most people would be like, what are you talking about? Cops are murdering KKK, blah, 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 blah. Like we all know that. But that narrative is so prevalent and so out there that I think it colors how we interpret a incident like George Floyd.
If you used a different example, I'd be more willing to agree with you. But for sure, I get your point. Your overall point, I get it.
Well, what do you think, Gambit?
What do I think about what? Which part of this conversation?
I don't know. Whatever you're saying you disagree with.
I think the Derek Chauvin case was with such gross negligence that I think it's a defensible position to say that potentially he could have had like some sort of racial feelings on black people, and I can't parse that out. So I need a less egregious example to agree with you. That's all I'm saying. This is like the most.
Do you want your pound of? Do you want your pound of flesh?
That was the whole question.
I literally thought things froze up for a minute.
Do you want your pound do you want your pound of flesh?
No, I just want him in jail. That's all.
That is what I meant.
Should he be killed? Would you be okay with that?
No, I don't think that we should kill people. Just like I said earlier, both black people just want justice. They don't want people to be murdered, right?
How long they just a little torture, just 10 years of torture. How long do you want him to go to jail for?
A long fucking time. Jesus Christ.
How long?
Really long time. I don't know.
How long?
I don't know. 30 years.
That'd
be pretty dope.
The guy's like 50, isn't he?
Yeah, he'll probably die in jail. That's dope.
Okay, well,
I think people in positions where they have
I think you just fucked up.
Nick, can you tell him to be quiet?
I think you just fucked up, buddy, because you just said you don't believe in the death penalty, but it's dope if he dies in jail. I think you have some internal conflict about this.
No, I don't. Not at all. I think that if you have a monopoly on violence, that you should be judged with more scrutiny than most other positions. And if you use that monopoly that you have on violence to commit gross negligence and murder people, I think giving you 30 years, whatever your age is, that's your problem when you decided to do it. If he was 20, it doesn't change the punishment that I would give him. So whether he was 20 or 50, the likelihood of him dying in jail because he's 50 is high, but that doesn't change how I felt about.
Okay. What if George Floyd said, you're a real asshole while he was arresting him, and then Derek Chauvin said, "F you, N-word," and then shot him? How many years do you think he should go to jail for that?
At least an extra 10 for the N-word.
Wait, you said Derek Chauvin?
Yeah. What if that had happened? What if that was how it went down instead?
How hate crime modifiers for certain things? Yeah, for sure.
How long do you think? How long?
More clear.
I want a number. How many years should a police officer go to jail? No, how many years should it? I don't. Well,
we said 30 earlier. Now I'm saying add 10 for the hate crime.
So 40?
Hate crime modifier. Yeah, 40 years. Yeah. Dope.
Okay.
I love it.
So Derek Chauvin, I want to get this straight. Derek Chauvin, if he intentionally murders somebody and shoots them and calls them an N-word while he's doing it, completely snaps and just murders the guy in broad daylight, gets 40. But if he, assuming you believe, negligently, accidentally kills him by leaning on his neck, he gets 30?
I think it was accidental, but yeah.
You think he wanted to kill him? You think he wanted to kill him?
I think I don't. So this is.
Please don't take that approach.
No. I'm not saying that he. I think that he.
You said it wasn't accidental.
No. It can not be accidental, but
not be on purpose.
Intentional and negligence.
That's actually not true. Those terms are mutually exclusive.
Intentional and negligence are different. I think
yes,
any person.
That's the question you're being asked: was it intentional or was it negligent? Because you called it gross negligence. But then wait, you called it gross negligence. Do you want to talk or do you want me to yell at you?
I want you to yell at me.
Okay, you said gross negligence, but then which means not on purpose. And then, but I've said if he shoots the guy and calls him the N-word, you're saying he should get 10 years longer. But it's not that 30 versus 40. It doesn't seem like a huge difference. But then when I say that to you, you're like, well, I don't know if it was on purpose or not. So I feel like you haven't settled whether you think it was on purpose.
I feel like 30 versus 40 is a really big difference. I don't know. Make it 60 if that makes you happy. I don't know.
I don't want you to make me happy. I want you to. It will make me happy is if you didn't want revenge.
I don't want revenge.
30 years
of justice.
Revenge.
No, it's justice.
What's the difference?
It's a good question. I think that if we have a legal system and we have agreed upon laws, I think enacting those laws with everybody being aware of the consequences isn't. I think it's silly to call that revenge. Silly, extremely silly, I should say.
Well, yeah, but you could say that about hanging people. Would you agree that killing people is revenge, the capital punishment?
Wait, okay, now you're asking me, do I believe
the government, you're just saying the government should be able to do, if everybody sits down and makes it a law, then the government can do whatever you want. You're not willing to call it revenge.
If I think it's just, yes. I don't think capital murder.
I think I think when you think about the government doing something awful to somebody, if you get a boner, it's probably revenge and not justice.
I'm still soft. No boner.
I don't believe you. I think people get a hate boner.
Yeah. Some people probably do.
It scares me.
Probably do. It should.
I've got a hate boner question for you here, then, Mr. Girl. This is the last one I have on my question of debate topics. I hope I'm allowed to say this. Should I just say the C word? I don't actually know. Now
we're on YouTube, so yeah.
Yeah, I guess I should. And I'm not white, so I can't say it. The C word is a racial slur. However, it's generally socially acceptable to be racist towards white people. If the goal is to achieve equal social standing among the races, shouldn't the C word eventually be the same amount of offensive as the N word?
Oh, God.
And
I thought this was going to be a good question.
That's not a good question to you, Gambit? And will that ever be achieved by making the C word more offensive than the N word, less offensive, or both? You don't think that's a good question, Gambit?
I think if we start to
let's start
yeah,
there.
for sure. Yeah, like no real people don't consider it a slur. Those are all like idiots. But yes, it's a slur that people shouldn't use for sure, without a question. There's no good utility in using it. Is it tantamount to the N word, or could it be tantamount to the N word? I would say if there becomes centuries of oppression and people are hurling this racial epithet at the group that is being oppressed, at that point, then you could say that they're tantamount to each other. Yes, I would agree. Until that happens, though, I think it's a foolish argument.
Do you think the N word is getting less offensive over time? And does it? How do you feel about that if it is?
Do I think it's getting less offensive over time? No, I think people are still getting hit with cans of sweet tea. So no, I don't really think so. I think if you walk up to the average group of black people and you say the N-word and you're not black, then you're probably going to, there's going to be violence, right? And as long as that's the norm, then I don't think there's cultural artifacts we can point to say that it's less offensive.
Does anybody think the N-word is getting less offensive, or is it?
I do. Absolutely.
I think it's getting more offensive.
I think that the N-word has lost almost all of its bite, except for when people use it as an insult. The only people that get offended by the N-word are people that are pretending to get offended on behalf of other people. When a white person tweets out a meme with the soft A or whatever, and everybody's freaking out, it's not because they're actually offended. They're just offended on behalf of ghosts that they think are offended. I don't think anybody truly actually gives a fuck anymore. I don't believe it.
You disagree, Gambit.
I completely disagree, for sure, without a question. Yes, and I think most black people have that position too. I don't think it's a minority of people.
You know what? I take the bet. I would take the bet. I bet most black people don't even give a fuck. If you went to a normal black person, you're like, this white dude, he tweeted out a meme and one of the guys said the N with the A in it, they'd be like, I don't give a fuck. They'd say, who the fuck cares? That would be my bet.
If we're reducing the context to the meme thing, then yeah, I might agree with you. But if we're talking about just general usage of the term, yeah, for sure. Yeah, people are getting hit with sweet tea every day.
What about when playing video games? I think that's done a lot too.
Well, but that's the other one they use.
Well, I just think it's normalized it a lot to the point where I can just say for myself, when I was 19, if I heard somebody say the N-word, any form of it in any context, my blood would boil. Now I don't feel anything.
I mean, maybe that's just being on the internet for a long time.
I think mid 2000s, World of Warcraft or Xbox Live probably outdid the slave trade for the amount of N-words.
Yeah, I mean, notice that y'all are talking about contexts where people aren't around each other and it's virtual, right? If we're talking about real life scenarios, these things don't happen. That's what frustrates me about YouTube and Twitch conversations about the N-word. We always talk about this virtual shit and people tweeting shit. This shit doesn't happen in real life. People get hit with sweet tea and get put on YouTube in real life. That's what happens in real life when people use the N-word. That's just the reality. So yeah, if you're gonna ask me, do I think?
I think it depends. No, I think it depends on how
space-
you're using it. Like, yeah, if you use
It
the
doesn't,
N word
it
as a
doesn't.
slur, as a slur at a person, sure. But if you said it like the N word usually now is mostly meant to mean dude. That's like with the soft A, that word means dude.
If
It's
you
not,
go
it's
to
not even,
most
Yeah, it's
black-
like my
it's
homie.
not a slur. That is not used as a slur. Nobody says it as a slur. If you say it with a soft A, you're signaling that you're like on the side of the person that you're saying it to. You're not hurling it as an insult.
if you go to the mall in whatever city you're in right now, and you walk up to a bunch of black people and say, "What up, my N-word?" I don't suggest you do this because you might try to do a documentary. I don't suggest this. If you did this, in most cases, there would probably be violence. Or
No, I know that you maybe
have.
have a very negative opinion of black people and think that they're all just violent criminals who will beat the shit out of you for no reason. But I will say to you that I think that's actually not true. I think that I think you would just be met with extreme social awkwardness. I think maybe someone will be like, "Whoa, hey there,
MrGirl, I'm begging you to not do this type
but
of
like the idea that the average person is just going to assault you and then like maybe go to jail just because like it's like it's a code you can just say to any black person to like activate their like Jason Bourne instincts to start just like beating the shit out of you. I don't think that's true.
You didn't let me finish. I said there would be violence or something could become close to that. Like, I'm not saying that everybody's going to hit you, for sure not. That's crazy. I'm not saying that everybody's going to do that. But I think there will be extreme negative, like, it'd be a negative interaction.
I don't think it would go viral. I don't think it would go viral on Twitter, though.
Go through YouTube and look at what happens.
It'd be like that was uncomfortable. I don't think people would be like, this fucking racist white supremacist motherfucker thinks he can come up to us and say, "What's up, my N-words? Are you kidding me?" Like, I don't see that kind of outrage. I think it would just be like that's weird or awkward. You shouldn't do that.
You know, the real C word that's kind of just gone under the radar a little bit and people should be a lot more worried about, especially online, is colonizer. Every time I see someone bring that word up online, it's like the way they're talking is like you would actually be perfectly fine with like yeeting all the white Australians or South Africans or even Americans.
Yeah, I think earlier Steven said that it's a dog whistle.
Just means what? Like in the same way that like people used to say in the past Western values and they really meant white people. Now when people say colonizer, it's just a way to shut on white people.
Yeah, because like when you think colonize, like an actual colonizer is someone who goes over to Africa with a gun and shoots someone and takes their land. But it's like, if you're calling like the third or fourth generation and calling them that, then yes,
or like the 30th generation, depending.
Yeah, well, like anything against them is justified. Yeah, like that. Yeah.
So can I cut in real quickly here and we can go back to the other thing we were fighting about a second ago. So I did some digging because I wanted to look more into this. So first and foremost, here you have a study from 2016 that found that even after adjusting for crime rates, police officers were more likely to use force with black people than white people. You also have multiple different studies which show that even after adjusting for crime, black people are still more likely to be
they're more likely to use force, but they're not more likely to kill them.
Hold on. Yeah. But that's what contributes to the higher likelihood of death as well. Because there are going to be more cops, they might have more encounters, which only then follows that they are more likely to experience police brutality or death from cops.
But I'm saying per encounter, a cop is more likely to pepper spray a black person disproportionately. But from what I have researched, they're not more likely to actually shoot them per encounter.
In any given kind of encounters with the police, a black person can be likelier to be killed than a white person, even if the overall rate of deaths per encounter appears lower. Yeah, I mean, but this is because black people might have a higher rate of interaction with police. When you say, yeah, but what about crimes? Okay, but we can't get the studies that we have right now, though. What do we show? We have higher rates of black people that are killed by cops as compared to white people. You're right to bring into question crime. Then we have the fact that even after adjusting for crime, police are more likely to search and more likely to use force, which means that even after adjusting for crime, the likelihood of encountering an officer for a black person goes up significantly, which then only follows that it will also lead to disproportionate rates of police brutality and in some cases death by police.
Well, yeah, I guess my point is that there's a big.
So you agree with me then? So you agree with?
I agree with you. Well, no, I disagree with your implication that police are more likely to shoot black people just because they're black. I think they're more likely to shoot black people because of other factors that are correlated to them being black. I think there's a big chain. So I agree. It's systemic racism. There's a big chain of events, and there's a lot of prejudice present in every link in the chain, but we're all really focused on the last link in the chain, which is the shooting. And I think that that's one of the links that actually statistically has less prejudice than you'd think, but there's a lot on the other links. But it's easy to just hate the person who pulled the trigger and say they're a bad apple, they're a bad person, they should go to jail for 30 or 40 years or whatever, than it is to look at the rest of the chain and say, like, this is actually a more complex question or problem that's a lot harder to talk about, and we probably shouldn't just be blaming the last dude that
pulled the trigger. And I partially agree with that for sure. I mean, when you say there's no intent, or they're not intentionally looking to find black people to kill, you're right. Yeah. I don't think that. I think the majority of cops are just good people who are trying to do their job and trying to keep the city safe. But the way the system works is how it disproportionately affects.
Oh my God, that's the worst thing I've ever heard.
Wait, what did I say?
Sorry, that most cops are good people trying to keep the system safe. My head almost exploded. I'm sorry.
Most reasonable people agree with that. It's only Vosh and idiots like that are like,
a good chunk of cops. Yeah, they're just good people out there trying to do a good job. But that's why systemic racism plays such a big role, is that it isn't an individual racist malice or evil cop. It's an entire system that is leading to.
Then why should he go to jail for 30 fucking years? That's
because he still committed an act of murder.
I know, but it's not his fault.
No, it was his fault in that case.
It's not you can't choose to be stupid. Like, it's like, I just don't think it's his fault.
The issue is there's like a higher level of responsibility in a police officer. You're stepping into a role where society has said, listen, like, we're going to trust you so much. We're going to say that you're the only type of person in society that's allowed to, with impunity, beat the shit out of other people if they're not following all of the rules that we've agreed on. I can't do that as a citizen. Other people can't do that as security guards. You alone get the responsibility and the privilege, to some extent, to exercise those powers against us. Given that heightened privilege to be able to execute those powers against us, you also have some level of heightened scrutiny where if you are going to be the one that we entrust with that, you need to use them as responsibly as possible. That's why, like, a stranger hitting a kid is like pretty shitty, but a parent hitting a kid is devastating because a parent is entrusted with a certain level of responsibility for that child. And when you break that trust, there's probably going to be an added repercussion that follows. Same thing with a police officer is entrusted with the monopoly on power.
I would agree with that. But it's not just negligence, though, Mr. Girl, is that he also. Well, I guess it would be negligence in this case, actually. But again, it's not just him acting stupid in the moment. He was violating police protocol by using that position with his knee on Floyd's neck.
Sure. So I agree, Stephen, with the premise. But the conclusion being that, therefore, if you shirk these heightened duties or misuse this heightened amount of power we've given you, that therefore you should go to jail or be tortured or punished. I just don't agree with that.
Yeah, that's fine. But you're not, you guys, neither of you are really talking about Chauvin or anything at that point. Now you're just talking about like your concepts of like what should justice or retribution or whatever look like in a criminal justice system, right? That's really what the conversation is about. Like, I don't think you guys
we might have to get into one of Destiny's favorite subjects is axiomatic principles, right?
Sure, but I'm saying that like in a conversation about Chauvin, like, we all agree he did something wrong. I think the disagreement is just what the punishment ought to be.
No,
punishment isn't.
I think he was just stupid. He doesn't think he did.
No. Hold on. The negligent part, we all agree that he was negligent.
Let's ask him though. He's here, Mr. Girl. Do you think he did anything wrong?
I think it is wrong. I think it's wrong to kill somebody for no reason. So yeah, I think he did something wrong. I don't think he did it on purpose. I think he did something
the comparison,
wrong.
What Mr. Girl would say, what he's saying, he's saying this is, it's wrong in the same way that if you drive drunk and get in an accident and kill somebody, it was an act of gross negligence. Like, you chose to drive drunk, saying that he chose to kneel on that guy's neck, but he didn't intend to kill him. That was the negligent part. The negligent part wasn't the physical action. It was the outcome of the physical action. Much the same that the negligent part of drunk driving isn't actually hitting somebody while drunk driving. It's the getting drunk and then driving. That was the issue.
Yeah, and so I think drunk driving is a great example of how I think we should view most police killings of innocent people. And I think that instead, we view it with this highly racialized, angry, bloodthirsty lens that I don't think is right, I think instead you wouldn't say somebody should go to jail for 30 years for drunk driving and killing somebody, right?
Sure. Well, although you would disagree, Mr. Girl, if there was evidence that he was acting with malice, right? Like if he was saying shit like get on the ground, N-word, like come over here, and then he was doing that, then you'd probably say, okay, well, hold on, this is looking like he killed the dude, he murdered the guy, right?
Yeah,
sure.
absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Was murder in both cases.
Wait, real quick, how much longer is this panel going on for?
Until you leave.
Oh shit. Okay, I have stuff that has come up. I need to take off.
You can leave. We can. I think this is the last question, right?
Yeah, okay. Well, I don't want to like crash your guys' party. You guys can keep doing your thing. So okay. I love you all very much. Don't make it weird.
I love you too.
Take care.
I'm not making it weird. I just fucking love you too, man.
Okay, cool. All right, I love you guys.
Hold on, Destin, before you go, hold on.
Yeah, what?
You think the C word and the N word have equal weight?
No, nobody thinks that. It's the dumbest thing in the world.
Okay.
Dick was asking it.
Who was?
Yeah.
Well, no.
The
discussion question is, if we're heading towards equality between black people and white people, does it stand to reason that we're also heading toward equality of the slurs used by those groups?
They should be, but nobody will ever admit that, because everybody always says that like the N-word is really bad because it represents systemic injustice and blah 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 blah. And the question is, in a world where everybody's equal, that should be the question. In a world where black people and white people are on equal footing and have equal power, do you think that we ought to be able to utter the N-word slur, or should it be treated the same as the C-word slur? The answer to that is probably yes, but nobody would ever admit that. So.
Does anybody think that the C word is a slur against black people? Like, I always kind of thought it was a reminder of slavery and just teasing them.
Whoa.
Maybe I'm alone.
I love you guys.
Maybe if you call yourself one to a black person, proudly.
Yeah.
And then call them the N-word.
The existence of it as a slur seems...
All right, be careful, dudes.